All right, good evening, everyone. It's 7 p.m. This is the Westminster City Council meeting of June the 22nd, 2020. Just as an opening piece, the council has 5 separate meetings scheduled for tonight. There is a board meeting of the Westminster Economic Development Authority, as well as a post-meeting item for that same group. There's also the City Council meeting and a post-meeting of that group. And finally, there is an executive session later tonight. We will be starting the first meeting tonight as the Westminster Economic Development Authority Board. When that is done, we will adjourn that meeting and re-establish a meeting as the Westminster City Council. When that meeting is done, we'll come back to the post-meeting Economic Development Board, and then we'll finish the post-meeting items for the City Council. And after that, then we will convene as an executive session. So as we try to do on each council meeting night, we try to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first meeting item tonight will be under the Westminster Economic Development Authority. And remember, members of the council, this is the board meeting, so we are in a board meeting at this time. Ms. Parker, if you would please take the roll.
Certainly. Mayor Atchison.
Here.
Councilor DeMott.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Seitz.
Here.
Councilor Seymour.
Here.
Councilor Scully. Here. Councilor Smith.
Aye.
Very good. And Councilor Bowles.
Here.
Okay. Members of the board, you have before you the consideration of the minutes of the preceding meeting of March the 25th. Ms. Seitz?
And I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, if you'll allow me just to interrupt really quickly, I apologize. It looks like that might have been a copy paste error. The minutes that you are considering this evening for WEDA are the minutes of June 8th, 2020.
June 8th, okay. That stands corrected then. Ms. Seitz, if you would, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the minutes for June 8th, 2020 as presented.
And Mr. DeMott.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the approval of the Westminster Economic Development Authority minutes of June the 8th. All those in favor, please signify by aye.
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 All right, any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Moving on, board members, the first item of business tonight is the resolution number 206 regarding a lease amendment with GMRI. And this has to do with the Olive Garden located at 5551 West 88th Avenue. And Mr. Seymour, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 206, authorizing the executive director to execute a lease amendment in substantially same form as presented with GMRI Inc. for Olive Garden number 1417, located at 5551 West 88th Avenue in downtown Westminster.
Mr. Demott,
Second.
I have a first and a second. Is there any discussion about this by any member of the board? Or Mr. Hall, if you have any comments you'd like to ask?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. This is John Hall, Economic Development Director with the city. I would just point out that the Olive Garden has been at this location for 28 years, and they have been a long and good partner in our community. When we purchased the site in 2011, we became their landlord, and thus as we head into the current recession and with the pandemic, they have requested of us a 4-month abatement of their rent to be repaid over roughly the following 12 months. It's a very high-level overview. I believe we've provided a complete staff report. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, Ms. Seitz, you had a question or a comment?
Mr. Chairman, it's more of a comment. I just wanted to say thank you to staff. I think during COVID, a 4-month abatement, it obviously is very understandable, and I like how we accommodated them and also make the residents of Westminster whole by getting that over the following 12 months. I think it was a really smart decision. I hope that other landlords in the community, if they have the ability, would be willing to work with their commercial and residential tenants, because these are unprecedented times, and I think we all benefit when we allow these businesses to recover from this loss of revenue. So thank you to your entire team, and I look forward to voting yes.
Any other comments from the board? Seeing no other comments on resolution number 206, Ms. Parker, this is a roll call vote, if you would, please.
Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Councilor Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Seitz.
Yes.
Seitz votes yes. Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Councilor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. And Councilor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes.
All right, thank you, members of the board. The motion passes on a 7-0 vote. The next item is item B1. This is a move for adoption of resolution number 207. Member of the board, Mr. Frankel, you have a comment first?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Dave Frankel, City Attorney. Want to thank very much Mr. Murray for his assistance in drafting all of these materials. Wanted also, though, to bring it to your attention that in our review of tonight's packet, Mr. Murray has pointed out that we've inadvertently omitted some documents relative to Block D2. And we need to recommend to council that though you certainly could proceed tonight as to Block C3, the second portion of this action item is relative to Block D2, and we'd recommend continuing the second portion to a date certain, potentially July 6th, if that's possible. That way we can ensure the proper publication of all of the attachments for Block D2.
All right. Once I get a motion on the first one, we'll deal with that, and then we'll come back to resolution number 208. Ms. Seitz, I'm not sure if you're up for the motion, or Ms. Smith, you're up for a second. Ms. Seitz, would you do the motion for 207, please?
Thank you. Based off of our city attorney's comments, I just want to make sure I do this correctly. I move for to pass resolution number 207 regarding a purchase and sale agreement for Block C3 in downtown Westminster with Schnitzer West LLC.
Ms. Smith,
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Before I ask for questions or comments, Mr. Tripp, would you like to add anything to the resolution for 207?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I want to first of all thank the council for their support of 3A. I think that was important and a really good step. The Olive Garden has been a really wonderful tenant on that site for an awful long time, and they've continued to do very well in spite of all the construction and disruption, and I think it was appropriate to provide that support to them. I really want to turn it over to Jody Andrews to introduce John Hall to speak a little bit about this item 3B that does include with both C2 and D3, C3 and D2, a very substantial action tonight, and one that one wouldn't expect necessarily in the economic cycle we're in right now and all the other issues. But we have a terrific partner here in Schnitzer, and they're working with a very, very quality staff of yours that worked really hard to bring this to the finish line. So Jody, if you would, please.
Yes, thank you, Don. This is Jody Andrews, Deputy City Manager. Chair, members of the board, just want to give brief introductory comments and then ask John Hall, our Director of Economic Development, to give also a brief presentation on this project. And thank you for adjusting tonight. Apologize that some of the material for the second recommendation on parcel D2 is not in order, so we will hopefully be able to readdress that part of this at a subsequent meeting. Regarding the both parcels, from the beginning of development for downtown Westminster, staff and the consultant team have been working to bring office buildings and primary employers to the site. We know that creating a strong office market will produce the daytime activity that is needed to support the restaurant and retail establishments that will make this a vibrant neighborhood. It's also important to attract this kind of use to generate commercial property tax that supports the ongoing development of downtown and provides a return on the city's investments. We've been in conversations with the office developer Schnitzer West for almost 2 years, working to put together a strong proposal for development. Tonight, we're presenting to you purchase and sale agreements for block C3, and as noted earlier, subsequent meeting, we will present the same for parcel D2. And this is an exciting proposal that brings with it a number of benefits for both the downtown and the city as a whole. Schnitzer West has established a significant presence in Seattle and Denver markets with over 8 million square feet of office space in their portfolio, 2 million of that in Denver, where they're focused on expansion. They recently completed a project in Cherry Creek that serves as an example of what they'll bring to Westminster. High-rise, Class A+, LEED Silver certified office space. And LEED is a Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design certification program developed by the U.S. Green Building Council. And it sets out for the sustainable design, construction, operation, and maintenance of buildings. And we're very excited to have Schnitzer as a partner in our downtown, who's a leader in production of LEED Silver certified office buildings. The agreements presented before you this evening represent a mutually beneficial development deal without incentives. There are no incentives attached to the development proposals before you this evening. And the land sale price for the 2 parcels will total over $6 million. The buildings, when completed, again, will range from 6 to 10 stories in height and will be a minimum LEED Silver certified. We are pleased to present this proposed deal to you tonight, and I'll turn it over at this point to John Hall, and I believe he has a brief presentation to present.
Thank you, Jody. Again, Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is John Hall, Economic Development Director. And Matt, if you could pull up the presentation. Thank you. Next slide, please. So as Deputy City Manager Andrews described, we are before you tonight with 2 blocks, although broken into 2 actions this evening, and we will only be requesting your action on block C3. And let me add my apologies regarding the documentation on block D2. As I looked through the packet, it became apparent that we had attached the resolution twice for block D2 instead of the resolution and the contract. So focusing on block C3, which you see in the center of this chart, just south of Center Park and just east of Center Square, that'll be the subject of our request for your consideration this evening. Next slide, Matt. Block C3 is broken into 2 lots. Lot 2 is the lower parcel, which is shown in the upper photograph. So if you look at the 2-dimensional drawing on the upper half of this slide, you'll see Lot 2 near the bottom of the frame outlined in a dotted line. On that portion of the block, Schnitzler West intends to develop approximately 150,000 square feet of Class A office space with ground floor retail and structured parking. We will also be working with them to finalize a license agreement for 300 parking spaces in the C2 parking garage, which is directly south of this property. As Deputy City Manager Andrews indicated, the building will be a minimum of LEED Silver certified. Purchase price for Lot 2 is nearly $1.7 million. Lot 1 is the lot closest to the park, and that will accommodate an additional 100,000 square feet of development space. We anticipate that being a complementary use to office. Purchase price of that lot is $500,000. So the total purchase price for lots 1 and 2 is just below $2.2 million. Next slide, please. While not taking action on block D2 this evening, I just did want to give you a high-level overview. We will be coming before you with a specific request for sale of this block for $4.25 million. It will accommodate, again, 2 lots and 2 buildings, each phase approximately 225,000 square feet, and also a minimum of LEED Silver certification. We're excited to move forward with Schnitzler West and take these next steps. So we look forward to your action tonight on Block C3, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Seitz, did you have any questions?
I did not have questions. I did just want to, I didn't realize there was going to be a presentation by both Deputy City Manager Andrews and John Hall, Development Director John Hall. This is just a wonderful step for our downtown. Since we made the decision to go block by block, we've always really considered our downtown almost an economic ecosystem that needed to have the right balance of uses. And my understanding, not as an economic development professional, is that office was one of the more difficult things to capture, but really powerful and essential for the vision of this downtown. And so at a time when commercial real estate, my understanding is not maybe as strong, to have the level of confidence in our site that not only are we getting beautiful office, we're also getting spec office, I think is incredibly impressive and communicates that the market believes in the vision for downtown Westminster. So I wanted to say thank you to everyone who's worked on it, including our residents that helped us vision it. And we've tested that vision and have supported it. So excited to have this step today. I'm delighted to be voting yes.
Any other comments from a member of the board, Mr. Voles?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to add my voice in support of this. It's exciting to me that we're at a place now where we are having the diversity that will be in this neighborhood now. And I think this is a great step forward to that with housing, office space now. We've got entertainment, dining, retail on the way. I think this is an exciting move, and I want to thank staff for their work on this. And I'm very eager to support this tonight. I'm also very glad to see the LEED certification, minimum silver. LEED certification is outstanding, so thank you for doing that as well. And I look forward to voting for this. I think it's a great step in the right direction for our new downtown. Thank you.
Ms. Scully?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also wanted to compliment the economic development staff for their great work on this. I've heard many times from residents about our need in our community for more office opportunity office space. And so I really appreciate this development and thank you for bringing this forward. I do have a question. We are in this odd time of COVID. I don't think it's permanent. And I do think that things will pretty much go back to mostly normal. But we do know that a lot of companies are making decisions right now to allow their employees to work remotely. And I'm wondering if we have any concerns that, or if the developer has any concerns, has expressed any concerns about not being able to fill the office space due to this time that we're in, where a lot of people are going to continue to work remotely. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to formulate this question in my head, and I know what I'm trying to ask, but I'm having a hard time getting it out.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. I think it's a wonderful question, and I will tell you that as we were moving through negotiations, we were getting close to the finish line and COVID hit. And the negotiations slowed down. They slowed down, though, because the developer really wanted an opportunity to make sure that they were able to adapt their existing properties to accommodate the needs for social distancing and to react to COVID. However, they never wavered in their commitment to our site and their desire to move forward. And so I'm very excited about the fact that they made good on that commitment to us and intend to move forward. Now, with respect to office space moving forward, what we're seeing is that obviously many organizations have been successful with some telecommuting taking place, or in some cases a great deal of telecommuting. What I'm hearing from both office developers and from office users is that there are probably some functions which will continue to be able to thrive in a telecommuting environment. However, there are other activities which really require face-to-face contact as a requisite for simply conducting business. And so there will continue to be demand for office space moving forward. It's really a question of how soon and how quickly we can move through the public health crisis of this to get to the other side, so that we can resume activities that more closely resemble the types of activities that were in place before the outbreak of COVID.
That's an excellent answer. Thank you so much, Mr. Hall. And I do understand that people do want to work in offices. I've heard it from not only my husband this week, but also my brother-in-law, who both are welcoming the opportunity to go back to an office. And it's interesting, my husband works at a WeWork downtown. So they are actually asking their landlord to open up more space for them so that they can socially distance. So I do think this is an important development. I'm very excited to vote yes on it. And I thank you for clarifying for me.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question, and you may have touched on it. I'm sorry if I missed it, and I may have missed it in the packet, but the parking garage, are we maintaining that? Are we, will this be added to our system as far as what we are issuing for observation of how many people are parking in downtown?
Thank you for the question. And I'm going to ask John Burke, our construction and development manager for the downtown, who really has been handling our interactions on the parking side, to at least begin to answer your question, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Yes, this is John Burke. Thank you for the question. And the answer is yes. That parking garage was designed and constructed for multiple users in the downtown, specifically being an office on this particular parcel. So yeah, this will be added to our parking management program. We currently have 4-hour complimentary parking for customers of the downtown, and there is monitoring right now via license plate recognition systems and cameras for that. And there will be fees associated with parking for longer than that. So this parking license agreement will allow this particular developer to park in that garage at a fee for that, typically 8 to 9 hour time frame during the day. So short answer is yes, that has been anticipated. It will be added to our parking inventory management for the downtown Westminster garage.
Thank you. That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Mr. Demott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious with the way the economy is, do we have any sense, has this really altered their timeline a lot? I know we've been talking about these for a little bit, the pretty exciting projects, and I'm just curious if they're going to be holding after they acquire the property, or if they're trying to stay on the same timeline, or if we have any sense of that.
Thank you, Councilor Demott. We do have, as an attachment to the contracts, we have timelines which the developer must meet to keep them moving along through the process of evaluating the site, designing the building, moving their drawings through the process and receiving land use approvals, and then ultimately getting to a place where they need to initiate construction. And so we've had those conversations with Schnitzer West. We have reached agreement on the timelines for their activities. C3, in fact, the lot 2 on block C3 will be the first building to come out of the ground. And then there will be a phased approach to future development based on demand in the downtown. Does that answer your question?
It does, and more so, I like to get that stuff on the record because I think it's important for the residents to understand how you guys have structured a lot of this stuff. And I assume you've probably learned over the years that we've owned that mall property. And I think, one of the things that we commonly hear is how long it's taken to develop. So I appreciate the fact that we approach things in that way where we're trying to make sure that we have timelines and deadlines as we move that property to assure that we actually are being successful in developing it. So I appreciate you giving that background on it for people to understand if they're listening tonight.
Any other comments from the board? All right, Ms. Parker, I have a motion and a second for the adoption of resolution number 207. Would you conduct a roll call vote, please?
Certainly. We'll start with Councilor Demott.
Yes.
Sorry, Board Member Demott. Thank you. Demott votes yes. Vice Chair Seitz.
Yes.
Seitz votes yes. Board Member Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Board Member Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Board Member Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. And Chairperson Atchison.
Yes.
And Atchison votes yes.
All right, board, we have passed resolution number 207 on a 7-0 vote. At the request of the city attorney's office and our legal counsel on this item, resolution number 208, I'm requesting a motion from the board to table this motion or table this resolution to a date certain of July the 6th. Mr. Demott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we table resolution number 208 to July 6th.
Mr. Voles.
I second the motion.
Okay. I have a motion and a second to table resolution 208. Are there any comments or questions, Ms. Seitz? Never mind, she withdrew. I got it. All right, I have a motion and a second for the purpose of resolution number 208 that it's the request of the city attorney and our legal counsel to table to July the 6th. Ms. Parker, again, a roll call vote.
Certainly. Vice Chair Seitz.
Yes.
Seitz votes yes. Board Member Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Board Member Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Board Member Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Chairperson Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. And Board Member Demott.
Yes.
All right, thank you, members of the board. This is an item that is now tabled till July the 6th. This also concludes the business of the Westminster Economic Development Authority for tonight. We do have a post-meeting item which will come up later on in the agenda tonight. So at this point, we are adjourned, and we will re-adjourn, or we will reconvene now as the Westminster City Council. The Pledge of Allegiance has already been accomplished. The roll call will stand from the previous meeting. The first item on the agenda will be the consideration of the minutes of June the 8th. And Mr. Voles.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the City Council approve the minutes of June 8th, 2020 as presented.
Ms. Scully.
I second.
I have a motion and a second for the approval of the minutes of the June 8th, 2020 Westminster City Council meeting. All those in favor, please signify by aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing nothing, the motion is carried. Next item on the agenda is item 4. This is presentations. We have none scheduled for tonight. Moving on to item 5, the city clerk has advised there is no one who has signed up for public comment tonight. But for the record, public comment was received from a Miss Karen Clavity last week. That has been entered into the official record. Moving on to the next item is a report of the city officials. Mr. Tripp.
Yes, thank you. I want to pull a couple things up here if you would just bear with me a second. Last week, and in the last few weeks, the state legislature approved Senate Bill 217. And we've talked about this quite a lot. You know what I'm referring to. It's known as the Police Reform Bill. It has several pieces to it that have been under study by our staff over the course of the development of this bill. Staff from the police department, our city attorney's office, human resources, finance and budget, the city manager office have all been involved in this and watching this along the way. And as you know, we had good support from you to have an amend position to this. There were some improvements that were made to the bill throughout, and we have the legislation today to move forward. The CAO has provided you with the summary of this bill and its impacts. Those impacts are immediate. When the bill was signed on Friday, those are things that are in place now. I want to share with you that there are two areas of particular immediate concern that we are working on right now, and we'll be diligent and we'll be as quickly as we possibly can coming back to you with resolution. All of our cities are in essentially the same position, and those two items are body-worn cameras and the changes in liability. And those aren't the only things in this legislation, but those are two things that are of particular immediate concern. The body-worn cameras were approved to be implemented in July of 2023, but we certainly as a staff feel that that's not a time frame that really meets the needs of the expectation of the public and also the expectation of our own police officers now that this is the law in the state of Colorado. We also have a concern, number 2, on the liability matters that now are providing for a higher level of personal liability, both civil and criminal, to our police officers. And we need to endeavor to find a way to make law enforcement, continue to have law enforcement be a profession that can attract folks to this work. We have an outstanding group of officers and leadership in our organization, and this is a very difficult thing for them. I now want to tell you a little bit more about some comments that I received from the chief. Let me just pull that up if I might, please. Thank you. Chief Carlson, we have an outstanding police chief, and as you might imagine, Tim has been as with the onset of this, has been really ahead of the curve in trying to look at alternatives if this were to be approved and how to deal with it. He has been in front of you on the body worn cameras issue in the last few months and did a very extensive study. For the public, the city was in the midst of deciding as we move forward whether or not we'd have body worn cameras. The original research that we had did not indicate it was a decision we wanted to make at the time. We've invested a lot into training, into mental health support, into technology, and we felt really good about our position. But nevertheless, this is the law of the land now, and we're going to execute on this. We do think that it's important to be timely. So I'm going to read a couple things that Tim said to me in an email he sent to me recently, and he's given me his permission to share this with you. But I want you to understand how thoughtful he's been about this and what he said to me, because I think it's fair for you to know. He says, in light of the recently passed Senate Bill 217, I want to convey my thoughts on the implementation of body cameras for our department. As you know, we have researched body cameras for a long time, and we're in the final portion of the evaluation by asking our community through a validated public survey and other means for further input. This is Tim speaking, aside from community expectation, the rising expectations of juries, judges, and prosecutors for body-worn cameras footage has now become the norm. Of significant concern to me, Tim speaking, and to the officers of the Westminster Police Department is a substantially increased liability that officers now face with the new legislation. It's not only true in the civil court processes, but legislation creates new criminal vulnerability for officers conducting their duties. With these new liabilities, increased penalties, and potential loss of certification due to a conflict during the performance of their jobs, officers are expressing more and more need for body-worn cameras. So us moving as quickly as we can on this is not only to express our support for the legislation and compliance with the legislation, but also I think for the good of our own police officers. Tim goes on to say, I am recommending and requesting that the city move to allow us to engage in a process of evaluation and purchase of body-worn cameras as soon as possible and well ahead of the July 23 deadline in the Senate bill. I believe it is needed for the protection of our officers and the benefit of the community. I'm just here tonight. I wanted to express this to you because almost all of you actually have made a comment during the course of this, wanting to understand how we as a staff would respond to this. And I just want to ensure you that we're working on this diligently. It is our desire to be ahead of that schedule that would be compliant, but is not really our own expectation of our compliance in Westminster. And we would be back in front of you as quickly as we can with a resolution on all these issues. With that, I'm sure happy to answer any questions about that matter. I know some of you may want to make comments under your section of the agenda this evening. The only other thing that I have this evening, Mayor and Council, is you have been through the COVID incident in particular, the hundreds, if not thousands, of emails that you've received from citizens wanting information, wanting to express views to you, I know have been very overwhelming, and it's remarkable to me the job that you do in responding to all of those and being responsive. Yet at the same time, I think communication, can probably be improved by us finding ways and maybe the use of different technologies to have this information more accessible to you, so you can find it easier. Many of you have expressed frustration, as the staff has also, of so many emails coming in and not been able to pull the ones to the top that you need on a timely basis. So the innovation communication folks have sent a survey to you. I think most of you have completed that. For those that haven't, please do so, and we'll be endeavoring to improve your technology to support you. And Mayor, that's all I have this evening.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tripp. Just to kind of follow up on Don's comments, last week, Metro Mayors convened a series of meetings in which on the 16th, we included city managers and police chiefs from around the region. There were approximately 90 people on the call. And the pending legislation that Don referred to, 217, was the topic that we were talking about. We also looked at a couple of things, not only in the body cameras, but the fact that there are comments from a lot of the police officers from around the region indicated that there is a lack of definition in many of the things that are in 217 that are going to take some time to ferret out. Some of these may require 217 to be amended in the next legislative session. Some things may not get amended until there's a court case to decide the interpretation of that. However, we are under 217 that was signed into law on Friday. The Metro Mayors is going to continue to meet, but into what Don was talking about, especially on the body worn cameras, we have a meeting on Wednesday of the Metro Mayors group along with our city managers to talk about how we can cooperate with cities bordering us to look at the opportunity to do a collective purchase or lease, whatever is best, and how we can help each other, especially some of our very small communities. This is a big impact to them as well. So we'll have that conversation on Wednesday. That doesn't mean we're slowing down anything we're doing here. A lot of things are still being worked, as Don indicated, from our city manager's office, from the city attorney's office, risk management, from the PD, and from our HR department as well. We have a group working on the interpretations of what the liability means, not only to the individual police officers, but also to the city as well. And how can we best make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect our officers and our citizens as well. Since this bill was only finally signed on Friday, we don't have answers to all that today. There's a lot of things that are unknown. And one of the big players in this whole conversation is our insurance company, being Sursa. They are also looking at trying to determine what does each element of the law say and what does it mean? And can we cover everyone in each instance that's defined in there and those that aren't defined? So the work of the city staff, along with our insurance, all of our partners, will continue over the next couple of weeks, trying to make sure we fully understand before we make any changes to policy, or we add new policies, or we buy something, that we fully understand what we're doing and where the protection is. I will tell the council and those who are on the phone, I was contacted by at least 3 different employee groups over the weekend. They are expressing very high concern of what's being done to our PD, what the impact is not only to the men and women who are in uniform serving, but also to their families. So be assured we are doing everything we can to make sure we fully understand the requirements of the law, that any officer understands what their roles and responsibilities are, and those will be done through training and through the chief and through his staff, through HR, risk management, for the city attorney's office, wherever we need to make sure everybody is on the same page as we move forward. So I appreciate the groups from the employee base that have reached out expressing their concern. Believe me, we're going to do everything we can to make sure we're on the right step, that we're protecting our employees and the cities as well. We ask you to please be a little bit patient. This is not something that's been in our hands for a long time to look at. And there's a lot of interpretation, as many of the chiefs from the area said, there's variations in the interpretation. So we have to get all those things worked out so that we're all on the same page. Ms. Scully, you have comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do not have a comment. I withdraw.
All right, Mr. Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to follow up, just a little off script on this one on 217. In previous comments that I've made too in public, that bills rushed are not always best bills. And so we will have to see as it going forward, but to express my full support for the honorable men and women of the Westminster PD and how we will look for supporting them in the future and keeping their families from being at risk monetarily. So I appreciate that. And then just one update during my comment period here too. I just wanted to give recognition to our personnel board that had an outstanding meeting, and updates from our director of Human Resources, Dee Martin, this last week. It was my first meeting with this board as a liaison, and an outstanding group of Westminster citizens. So I appreciate the opportunity to spend time with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Mr. Demott.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple things I would like to cover in my comments tonight. First, I had sent an email to Don and the team about what I saw Weld County is doing for their sheriff's department around the liability, which you mentioned. And I know I've had a lot of conversations, as you mentioned you did, around the concerns about the liability. And I think that my desire in sending that email is to assure that my desire would be to make sure that we are protecting our officers that are doing a lawful job in protecting this community. We have fine men and women who serve our community protecting it. And as long as they're working within the law, you know, I think that we should make every effort to assure that they're protected in doing that job. Like Councilor Seymour said, I feel like this, 17 was very rushed. And I have concerns about it, but I know there are, besides other law enforcement agencies around the state who are saying that they're going to step up to cover and protect their people. This isn't really that uncommon. School districts do the same thing to protect their people. So I just wanted to point that out, since I haven't gotten an answer back to that email formally, to assure that everybody actually saw my email and my ask. Secondly, I would like to take a moment to recognize that our Independence Day is coming up, and we won't meet again before then. I hope that in this time of unrest, everybody takes a moment and says a prayer for this nation. Quite frankly, we're going through some unrest, as we all know. This is still the best country that there is to live in on the planet. We have our mistakes, and we need to learn to unify and work past those. The other thing I would ask you to think about is recognize the men and women who have sacrificed for this country and laid down their life, as well as I'm wearing my 22 shirt. For those of you who don't know what 22 is, it stands for the 22 men or women of the military that lose a battle to suicide. That's an average every day in this nation that happens. So, this is a drive to put money towards stopping that. So I would ask you to think about those men and women who both lose their life in the fight and those who come home and lose that fight. And with that, I have no more comments. Thank you.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilor Demott, for your words on our nation and our men and women in blue and our first responders and all who protect us. I agree that the 217 was rushed in our legislature. It also has been quite modified since its original draft, which I'm interested to see how this is implemented within Westminster. I would like to have, I believe it was offered, and I'm sure that we're going to take this forward through our budgeting process coming up here in the next few weeks. But I would like to see how this fully impacts Westminster. I know that we're looking at this for a 2023 implementation, but I would like to see what it would be to implement right now versus in a year and 2 years and 3 years from now. So if we could have those budgetary items for us as we consider how we continue to support our Westminster Police, I would greatly appreciate that. And then just following off of items for last week and this week, I attended the Historic Westminster opening for the Creative Corner. They were closed due to COVID, and they reopened this weekend. They will only be open Saturdays from 9 to 4, and they are adhering to CDC recommendations of maintaining social distance and wearing masks. So that was nice to see people getting out and about again this past Saturday. And then last Friday, there was a CC4CA retreat. I wasn't able to attend, unfortunately, so I will be getting a briefing from staff tomorrow on key items from that retreat. And then the Historic Landmark Board will meet June 24th, this Wednesday at 7 p.m. And to find the agenda and more information on that, it is their continuation of their February meeting on the historic appropriateness of the rodeo. And let's see, I believe that's it. Thank you for that time.
Ms. Sykes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start with my update on the meetings that I went to last week on behalf of the city, and then I will I will go over my comments. So last week I had the NADA Strategic Planning Committee meeting. One of the things we talked about was basically the governor announced the formation of the RTD advisory committee that's going to come up. And so basically this is going to be appointed by both the governor and our representatives, Senator Faith Winter and Matt Gray. It will be made up of different individuals. Some of these individuals will be local governments in RTD's jurisdiction. There's a whole variety of names being floated around, including mine and Mayor Atchison's, along with Mayor Pat Quinn of Broomfield, Julie Mullica, a lot of really talented people who have dedicated a lot of their time and passion towards transit in the Front Range. And so I know that RTD will be well served. And I know the goal of this is really to not get your name on a committee, but rather to try to make sure that we're assessing how we can assist this agency in maximizing their ability to provide public value. So just wanted to give that update. There will be a meeting on Thursday of this week with the full NADA going over the different candidates. So NADA can make their recommendation of who they'd like it to be. I believe US 36 MCC will be doing something similar. I also wanted to give an update on the Colorado Communities for Climate Action had their annual retreat that I attended on Friday. Things were different this year as it was held virtually, so not as many opportunities to kind of connect with other community members, but still a good time. There were new officers that were formally selected. Erica Sparhawk from Carbondale is the new president, and Ashley Pearl of Aspen is the vice president. And they are keeping the kind of, I would say, almost the identity of the organization, which is the policy statements are unanimously approved rather than a majority consensus. We reviewed that policy, but everyone wanted to keep it, recognizing that as we continue to grow, it may become more and more difficult to manage. We are at 34 different communities this year, so that's a huge change. I think when we joined, it was only 14. It might have not even been that. They're rural, urban, suburban. I believe it is a 7th or an 8th of the state now, belong to CC4CA. So just really exciting to see people who are wanting to band together. They did put as one of their priority focuses COVID response, making kind of a climate-friendly COVID response as communities rebuild. So those are my reports. I did want to say, and I'm remiss in saying this so late in the month, but that June is Pride Month. And it's so important, I think, for people in our community to know they're valued, heard, seen, welcomed, represented, and empowered. And I think it's incumbent upon us as city councilors to remind our community of that. So happy Pride Month to everyone. Pride Month did start from the Stonewall riots. And so sometimes the arc of justice and equality is moved through protest. And so I do want to say thank you. And I think we're seeing a continuation of that move towards justice right now. It also, this Friday was Juneteenth, which is often called the second Independence Day for this country, because 2 years after the Civil War, or 2 years rather after the Emancipation Proclamation, slaves in Texas realized they had been freed 2 years previously. And so I want to recognize that as well. That feels like ancient history until you read that Bubba Wallace received a noose on his car at a NASCAR. And it's so troubling to hear that hate and intolerance still exists in our country. And I know that this community agrees in the common values of our country. Councilor DeMont brought up our Independence Day, and I think it's a really important day to reaffirm our commitment to the founding principles of our country, that we want to see everyone enjoy life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And I know my police department cares deeply about service and also wants to make sure that we push for equality and justice and the opportunity and freedom for everyone in our community to pursue happiness and a high quality of life. So I just want to say thank you. I cannot imagine how demoralizing it may be for PD in our country right now. I hope that we communicate on council that we see you as part of the chain of justice and the chain of equality, and I hope that our conversations on 217 being implemented really are a badge for our community, because I do believe we're doing a lot of what 217 is dictating, and I think we also can learn more about what some of those liabilities, some of the new requirements are, and learn from them and see really with full data how that impacts our organization. So I'm really looking forward to some productive and healthy conversations to make sure that we're supporting our community, our police officers, and the region. Councilor Smith made a comment about body cams being implemented in 2023, which I know is what the law is requiring. But I thought I just had heard from the statement from Chief Carlson and from our city manager that we are looking at accelerating that timeline, which I agree with, and I am similar to Councilor Smith. I'm looking forward to learning more about that and seeing how that would unfold. So looking forward to those conversations. I just would say this 4th of July, let's really focus on those core values and look to see how we can be consistently pushing for the realization of those values. Thanks.
Ms. Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to report on the meeting that I went to representing the city last week. I attended the JEDC, Jefferson Economic Development Council, and this was their monthly meeting. They had some updates on how the organization is growing, and they have a new leader, Jansen, and he is working very hard to recruit new investors. They have 65 new current members, and they have 20 more lined up that they think will become members by the end of the summer, and their goal is 90. So they are moving right along and really working hard for small businesses and all businesses in our community of Jefferson County to help them through this time of COVID, but also help them beyond COVID. And then we had a lovely presentation by Jason Glass, Superintendent Dr. Jason Glass, for Jefferson County Public Schools. I am absolutely just amazed and always blown away with how hard our educators are working to make sure our students can return to school as normal as possible in the fall on all levels. The Front Range Community College was highlighted on the Westminster Chamber live stream last Friday, and President Dorsey and Vice President Pellish did a fabulous job of talking about how Front Range is working really hard to move forward in this time and what that looks like. Our enrollments at Front Range are really, they're climbing. They're up for the summer, and they are moving for the fall. So a lot of people making choices that to go back to school during this time when maybe they have lost jobs or their situations have changed in their workplaces, looking for new education. I wanted to take a moment to also recognize that Juneteenth was a great celebration on Friday. It was a day of reflection and an opportunity to really think about the freedoms this country does offer to all of us, but how many of us maybe experience those freedoms in very different ways, and how we need to really continue our work toward inclusivity, diversity, and equity in our country. I was very fortunate. I work for the community college system of Colorado and also for Front Range Community College, and we were given the day off Friday to celebrate Juneteenth and to reflect upon its meaning and learn about it. So I took a lot of opportunity to read about How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi, and I watched a couple of movies, and I read a few articles on how we could be better citizens, better helpers to our fellow people in our country in realizing their equity and their equality that maybe isn't as prevalent, or is frankly maybe not even existing at this point for different populations. So I would encourage everyone to take that opportunity. And I know there is a national movement to make Juneteenth a national holiday, which I am very much in favor of, not because I want another day off of work, although that is a nice perk, but because I think that holidays that we celebrate freedom and independence are really important in this country. This is what our country is founded on, is our independence and our freedoms. And our Bill of Rights, our constitutions, these are great things, but they have not always been equally applied. And it's time that we start to look at that and we start to reflect on that. So I will tell you, I had a very nice Juneteenth with a lot of education and learning. Bill 271 is, it was good work by our legislature. I agree it was fast. I agree that maybe it wasn't perfect. And I think there will be a lot that will be ironed out here in the coming months and next year as well. That's kind of how policies work, is you put them into place, you see how they work, and then we have to go through and figure out what's really going to work and what's not. So I look forward to that opportunity. I know and I trust and I believe that our Westminster PD is a fine department and they do great work, and I'm very proud of them. And I know that they will work through this and figure out how to make this bill work. And what doesn't work, I know they will work with the policy makers of the bill to see how we can amend it and how we can change it, how we can build it better for our community. This is a great opportunity for us to really look at ourselves and how we do policy and how we do procedures, and who is being impacted and not impacted. So this is our opportunity to grow. And that's something that Westy has always done. We lead when it comes to growing, and I truly appreciate that.
Mr. Volz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to comment a little bit on recently passed or signed House Bill 217. I understand there's incredible anxiety right now amongst especially our police department and our officers. And I want to assure them that the members of this council support our police officers. The whole time I've been on the council, I've been very supportive of all the recommendations, whether it be training, equipment, anything we can do to make their jobs the best it can be and make them the best professionals they can be. So I was very relieved to hear from our city manager. I know our city attorney will be involved in the city attorney's office, and our mayor, that we will be looking at the details of this, and we will do everything we can to be sure our officers feel supported and that we can do what we can to support them. So I just wanted to say that, and for them and for their families, I know this is a time of anxiety, and know that your city council does support you. I also want to say, by the same token, we support all of our team and all of the departments. So I know right now because of House Bill 217, we're talking about the police department. But as a council, we support our team and all of our departments throughout the city government. So thank you for all the work you do. Like my colleagues, I know we probably have all received hundreds of requests for reform and immediate reform in our police department. And I know that's causing anxiety as well for our officers, because I know they're aware of that. I'm looking forward to the conversation amongst this council and throughout our community, where we talk about the reforms and the changes and the continuous improvement that our officers, our police chief, our deputy chiefs, our mayor, our council, city manager's office, we are continually looking at ways to improve in all of our departments, including the police department. So a lot of the calls for reforms, there are things happening in our department. So we need to educate our citizens, let our residents know the good things that are happening, and the reforms, and they're not reforms, they're continuous improvement. They're ways to do their jobs better. And they're doing that every day, every week, every year. So I look forward to that conversation throughout our community and being part of that, sharing that with our residents, and hearing what they have to say about reforms they want to see within our community, and working with our police officers so they feel supported. So I think we can do both, and I look forward to that conversation within our community. So thank you very much.
Any last comments from council? Okay, let's move on. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And before I open this up, let me bring up one item. I did submit a question to staff in regards to item 8C. And this is the design contract for the Water 2025 treatment plant. My only question to staff was that we had not seen a PSA on this property. And the answer I got back is we do have control of the property through a court order. We have possession through that order. And we are going through the negotiations for the sales price between the owner of the property and the city. Each one has to submit their evaluation reports, and then the court will make a final decision. So that eased any tension I had on going ahead with this contract. So I will be recommending to the council that we go ahead with all of the consent agenda items, and I did not need to have that pulled. Anyway, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, and Mr. Voles, I think you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion. I move that the City Council adopt the consent agenda items 8A through 8E. Thank you.
Mr. Demott.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the adoption of the consent agenda. Having had no request by council to withdraw any of the 5 items, I will consume that we are moving forward with that, and I have the motion and the second. All those in favor, Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Councilor Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sites.
Yes.
Sites votes yes. Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Councilor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. And Councilor Voles.
Yes.
Councilor Voles also votes yes. Thank you.
Thank you, council. The consent agenda is approved on a 7-0 vote. Next item on the agenda is appointments and resignations. This is for resolution number 22. Mr. Demott, I think you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 22, appointing 2 new members to unexpired terms on the Special Permit and License Board to fill vacancies.
Mr. Seymour.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the adoption of resolution number 22. Are there any comments or questions from the council? All right, seeing none, Ms. Parker, if you would, please, resolution number 22.
Councilor Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sites.
Yes. Yes.
Sites votes yes. Councilor Seymour.
I'm putting everyone in a bad light. Yes, please.
Seymour votes yes. Councilor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Councilor Voles.
Yes.
Voles votes yes. And Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes.
Thank you, council. Resolution number 22 is again passed on a 7-0 vote. Moving on to our next item. This is item 10A, adoption of resolution number 23, in regards to grant funding. Mr. Demott.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 23, authorizing the application for the acceptance of grant funding related to the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act.
Ms. Smith,
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the adoption of resolution number 23. Is there any comments from council? Seeing no comments, Ms. Parker, item 10A, please, resolution number 23.
Mayor Pro Tem Sights.
Yes.
Sights votes yes. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. And Counselor Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes.
Thank you, council. Item 10A, resolution number 23 is passed on a 7-0 vote. Next item on the agenda will be item 10B, Historic Westminster Interceptor Sewer Cut. And Ms. Scully, I think I got you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move based on the recommendation of the city manager to find that the public interest would best be served by authorizing a contract with Wake Associates, Inc. to provide engineering services for the historic Westminster Interceptor Sewer Open Cut Project in the amount of $272,741 plus a contingency of $32,274 for a total authorized expenditure of $305,015.
Mr.
Second.
Seymour, yeah, okay. So I have a first and a second for the adoption of item 10B. Ms. Seitz, you had a question.
I do have a question. I was curious as to why these remnants were not part of that, I think it was 2016 through 2019 Lower Dry Creek Interceptor program, sewer system upgrade. Why did we leave these? I would imagine, obviously, anytime we have to do road cuts, there is some disruption. So I was wondering why we didn't do them all at the same time, I guess.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes, Director Kirschbaum, Public Works and Utilities, would you please?
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. This is Max Kirschbaum, Public Works and Utilities Director. The reason for that, Mayor Pro Tem Sights, is that the work on the Little Dry Creek Interceptor Sewer focused on the components of the interceptor sewer itself, which is generally sewers larger than 15 inches in size. It's very common that we would have continuing and ongoing contracts for smaller diameter sewers as well, and it's a mark of a good and continuing commitment to taking care of what we own. So these specific examples are a collection of repairs that have all been identified as need to be upgraded or repaired according to the modeling work that we've done. So this is a very common practice.
Thank you so much for that. And so what I'm really trying to do here with the question is not because I'm questioning the integrity of that decision, but rather when residents ask, why didn't you fix this when the road was cut last time? By your answer, what I think I'm hearing is that they're not the same road cuts because these are smaller diameter. While they may be adjacent, they're not the exact same areas. So there wasn't any efficiency in fixing both at the same time.
That is correct.
Is that right? Thank you. Mr. Mayor, are you on?
Sorry. Ms. Parker, there are no other comments. Please go ahead with the roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Counselor DeMott.
Yes.
DeMott votes yes. And Mayor Pro Tem Sights.
Yes.
Sights votes yes.
All right, thank you, Council. That item 10B is approved on a 7-0 vote. Moving on to the next item, item 10C. This is an application for Denver Regional Council of Government Funds. Make sure I got it. Mr. DeMott.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to authorize staff to apply for the Denver Regional Council of Governments Regional Transportation Operations and Technology set-aside grant for the purchase and installation of critical traffic signal system infrastructure.
Ms. Smith,
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any question on behalf of the council on item 10C? All right, seeing no questions, Ms. Parker, roll call on item 10C, please.
Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith.
Mr. Mayor, sorry to interrupt. I had a question on this if I could.
Okay.
How often do these grants come out? And what would we be applying to as for the most important for the application if we did receive these grants?
Mr. Tripp?
Yes, Director Downing or Heath or whoever's handled this, please.
Thank you. It's Dave Downing, Director of Community Development, but I will ask our transportation engineer, Keith Klein, to answer the question, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Heath Klein, Transportation Engineer. And thank you for the question, Councilor Smith. So some of the DRCOG grants are annually, some are biannually. And this one for the Regional Transportation Operations and Technology tends to be on that biannually. So if we were not able to apply for this one, then we would have to wait for another 2 years before we are able to go after another grant.
Okay. And do we know what, if we were to receive it, what we would be applying it towards as far as which locations and what we would need?
Yes. So what we are actually applying for is to upgrade locations throughout the city. So the city of Westminster has quite a good backbone of fiber optics that runs to over 80% of our traffic signals, but some of the equipment there, like our controllers, are a little bit older. So what this grant is going to allow us to do is upgrade the controllers, which allows us to collect more data, and it communicates back to our central hub a lot easier, as well as doing some switch upgrades. And we are looking at upgrading our server, which all that data comes back to the city. So that is part of it. Then another half of the grant that we're looking at doing is to install additional pan, tilt, zoom cameras at several locations. So this does not detect the traffic that's happening, but allows the transportation systems coordinator to observe traffic patterns and zoom around the entire intersection and kind of get a better feel for what's going on. And then as a last part of that grant that we're applying for, we're looking at getting some advanced traffic management system detection. So what that does is it is into our system and picks up on the Wi-Fi or Bluetooth pings that come from vehicles or people's cell phones, and that educates the city on how fast traffic travels through our network. So all of these will just help to build our system and help us push towards being a smarter city.
Thank you. And did I read that this could potentially help our police department when it comes to accidents and other investigations that they might need to conduct?
Yes, the pan, tilt, zoom cameras, we would work with the police department to allow them to have access to that. So with that, we are looking at adding quite a few of the intersections where we do not currently have eyes. So in that sense, it will help out our PD department to be able to also observe the traffic, or if they're doing any type of investigation, we will definitely work with them for that.
Great. Thank you so much. That's all my questions.
Ms.
Thank you.
You have a comment?
I think you meant sites. Yes, I also had a quick question and comment. So I first wanted to say thank you for this very detailed staff report. I really appreciated the amount of effort that went into it and clarity on the benefits and where this would be invested in our community. I did want to make sure I checked my understanding. It seems like one of the additional benefits could also be in lowering consultant costs because of that data gathering that we would be getting automatically. Am I correct in that?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, you are correct. This would help with outside consultants. It also will help Dr. Cog to better understand like the Sheridan corridor, the Huron corridor, and they may not have to run their own staff to do travel times if we have a lot of these upgrades that we are asking for.
That's wonderful. I always like to be more efficient and save taxpayers' dollars. So that's wonderful. I also wanted to say I feel like this is incredibly timely. Last week we went over our citizen survey where mobility, transportation, ease of transportation, transit and multimodal were all tested as very important to our residents and something they'd like to see us working on. And everyone knows the frustration of poorly timed lights. So thank you for looking for the opportunity to stretch other dollars to help us make sure that we're doing everything we can to be a community that's connected and has ease of mobility. So thank you very much to your team.
Thank you. Comment, council? Seeing no other comments, Ms. Parker, item 10C, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will repeat the call for Councilor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Councilor Smith?
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Councilor Bowles?
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison?
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Councilor DeMott?
Yes.
DeMott votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sites?
Yes.
Sites votes yes. And Councilor Seymour?
Yes.
Seymour votes yes.
All right, thank you, council. Item 10C is passed on a vote of 7-0. Mr. Tripp, I will turn the COVID updates to you and your team.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to ask them to jump in, and they all know their portions this evening. And if you would, folks, just go ahead and follow each other through this.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. This is Max Kirschbaum, Public Works and Utilities Director again, on behalf of a report from our Emergency Operations Center with facility reopening approvals that have been given through the city manager's office. We have a few to report since our last report to you last week. And while there are more details to come, I'd like to give you 3 and their associated dates. Playgrounds in parks across the city will reopen on June 26th. That's this Friday. Countryside Pool will reopen on July 3rd. And adult softball leagues will commence by mid-July. More detail to come on that. It'll be one extended season, whereas a normal year, there are actually 3 separate seasons for adult softball leagues. So that's the changes to report for this week, subject to your questions.
Mr. Mayor, this is Larry Dorr speaking, Chief Financial Officer and Deputy City Manager. I can see that financial sustainability is next on your agenda, sir, but I do believe that you have a question, comment in the chat, sir.
Yeah, I do. I just found it. Mr. Demott, you had a question or a comment?
I just wanted to make a quick comment that I appreciate staff pivoting on the Countryside Pool and that we're able to get that open so the kids have somewhere to go swim this summer. So thank you.
Mr. Seymour?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also wanted to thank staff on working on the opening of Countryside Pool, but also the playgrounds. Got to get the grandkids out of the backyard, and also adult softball. We're going to be able to get that going too. So I appreciate the work that's going forward on this.
All right, thank you, Council. Any other comments? And Mr. Dorr, not seeing any more right now. Go ahead with your report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, Larry Dorr, Chief Financial Officer and Deputy City Manager. Earlier tonight on your agenda, under your consent agenda, you saw that we had our financial report and that we had our COVID Chronicle financial bulletin. And I know across those 2 items, you had over 30 pages of financial data. And we've been getting into a rhythm of providing COVID-related financial information and non-COVID related financial information. I just want to make a couple of comments related to the reports, talk a little bit about your next meeting and some things that I'll raise there about some of the things happening in a couple of our other CARES programs. So if I could, I'd just like to jump into some comments, and of course I'd be happy to answer any questions. But first, let me just say as a comment that in the report for the April sales tax economics collected in May and reported to you here tonight, it's the single largest decrease in sales tax revenue collections for a single month in the history of the city. It's a significant drop. It's unbelievable really to look at. At the same time, it is really generally within our forecast, some of the things that we anticipated. We look at our shopping centers in the shopping center report saw decreases of 50, 60, or 70%. Those are significant and deserve, I think, a little bit of attention as we move through our economic recovery from this pandemic. So I just wanted to call those to your attention. At the same time, this steep decrease in revenues is also matched with some savings in our expenditures as well. And we note some savings in our parks, recs, and libraries related to their changes in services. We have our hiring freeze statistics, which we presented there. We also have our expenditures on the in response, which to date, I just want to read into the record, is $379,496. That was just through this past weekend. So I want to have that into the record, Mayor and Council, just for your attention, and something that we've read in, I think, every week. Also, just want to give you a couple of things that are happening this week related to financial sustainability. First, today, the sales tax returns for the May activities must be postmarked or filed online. So I would anticipate in the next couple of weeks leading up to your next meeting that I'll have a little bit of information as to what was happening there in May. But of course, we saw full closures, same as we did in April, that is. And so I would expect the numbers to be generally about the same. I would say that we're pleased to see economic activity picking up in Westminster as we're all cracking the valve and transitioning to safer at home and the expansive and great outdoors and so forth. So I'm heartened by that, and also the sales tax collections. We'll have a bit of information to you there. Also happening this week, our executive leadership team will be meeting to reanalyze our forecast and review the results of our revenue and expenditures initiatives, including our hiring freeze, but also we'll be working on a long-term prognosis for the city and potential responses to a few different scenarios that could come about in our short-term future. And of course, we'll be talking with you, Mayor and Council, about that at your upcoming work in the next 30 days. So I just wanted to kind of touch on a few of those. I know that folks are reading these bulletins and reports, but at the same time, those listening in the audience, members of the public, I just wanted to describe this significant change in revenue. It's something that we anticipated in late March when we first began discussing this, but now to see the numbers in the reports to the nearest dollar is quite striking. Wanted to point that out. On July 6th, during long-term recovery and financial sustainability updates, I'll describe a couple of things happening with the city's social recovery principle under the CARES Act and some of the things happening there, along with some initiatives proposed for our people and programs serving people initiatives. So with that, I thank you for your attention to the financial sustainability of the city. Do know that we're working very hard, a large team of folks in finance department and policy and budget in trying to understand our revenue projections, our revenue collections, and of course, we're partnering very carefully with our economic development team and our entire executive leadership team. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mayor and Council, or I'll pass this along to our Director of Economic Development, John Hall. Thank you.
Ms. Sykes, you had a question?
I think I'll wait till after Director John Hall gives his presentation because I anticipate he may answer most of my questions.
Okay. Any other questions on items 2 or 3? If not, we'll move on to item 4. Mr. Hall.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I do want to spend a few minutes on item 3, which is long-term recovery. As I do want to spend just a moment talking about our need to both keep an eye on the trends and the spread of COVID, and also keep an eye simultaneously on economic activity in the city. Statewide, we broke through the 30,000 confirmed cases threshold. We finished this morning at 30,539 cases. That's an increase of 866 cases since the 18th, which means that we are seeing about 200 new cases statewide per day. The city of Westminster over the same period added 8 new cases since the 18th, bringing our case total to 471 confirmed cases. At a little bit larger level, most of you have probably seen information indicating that 29 states are showing significant increases in confirmed COVID cases. Of particular concern to us are the states of Utah and Arizona, which border Colorado, and which are seeing increases in cases. So as people begin to move about more freely, we remain focused on the impacts to public health moving forward. As I said, we are also keeping an eye on what's going on with economic activity, and the state of Colorado is now keeping unemployment information and producing unemployment information really at the municipal level. So a quick history of what's been going on in the city of Westminster. In May of 2019, our unemployment rate was 2.6%. And of our total resident labor force, we had only 1,736 people who were unemployed. By April of 2020, our unemployment rate had risen to 13.1%, and 8,600 people were unemployed. In last month, that unemployment rate has dropped back down to 11.1%, with approximately 7,300 individuals unemployed. That mirrors what's been going on at the state level. In May of 2019, the state unemployment rate was also 2.6%. It rose to 12.2% in April of 2020 and is now down to 10%. So while headed in the right direction, I think while there has been case flattening in Colorado and the unemployment situation is generally improving, there is still a lot of work to be done, and I think it's true that we're not out of the woods yet. Some of the numbers that Deputy City Manager Dorr provided offer great evidence as to why we have focused so keenly on the retail sector and our business sector in providing assistance. We started with the Westy Rise Business Grant Program, which we're going to talk more about in a moment. Served over 323 businesses and awarding $1.34 million. We've since launched the Westy Rise and Dine program. We've received 34 applications with an average grant amount of $8,100. Of course, we also engaged in the temporary expanded food and beverage area program. We've received 21 applications, approved 20 to date, with one still in review. On the partnership side, we're partnering with the Westminster Chamber on the Shop Local campaign, partnering with Adams County on the small business stabilization program, which launched today and provides grant funds to existing businesses. And on the 1st of July, we are partnering with Adams County in the launching of the tenant-based rental assistance program. So we continue to be active in both paying attention to COVID, paying attention to our economic base, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Ms. Sykes.
As anticipated, Director Hall always is so complete that he did answer most of my questions. My primary question was looking at some startling sales tax returns, really understanding that this is not happening just in the context of revenue for the city of Westminster, but these are truly businesses. I'm wondering if we're getting the sense for resiliency, like what is the tolerance level of our retail community. I would hate to see this go from, a few months of much lower than expected sales to the shuttering. And so I appreciate all of the work that you haven't just done with this Westy Rise business program and all of the different programs, but over the last few years of economic gardening to try to have a more resilient local economy. I guess I want to gauge, what do you think, and perhaps this isn't a conversation for now, but I'd like to know what you think the next steps are. What do the next few months look like? How do we plan for those, and how do we soften the worst?
Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem, thank you for the question. I think that is the challenge for all of us moving forward, is what do we anticipate the remainder of the summer to look like? The Westy Rise Business Grant Program was really designed as a 60-day program, and we're now into a second phase of assistance with our business community. We are out doing windshield surveys of businesses in the community. Among restaurants, we are finding that about 89% are open in some way, shape, or form. That doesn't mean they're all engaged in indoor dining or all engaged in on-premise dining at all. It means some are still operating with drive-ups and on delivery and that sort of thing. About 3/4 of our general retail establishments remain open by inspection. However, the longer the reductions in spending occur, the more precipitous it's going to be for businesses trying to hang on out there. So we will come back to you with more detailed information as we garner it. We are conducting surveys and working with our partners to try and identify trends that are taking place. So that's as best I can answer your question tonight.
No, you anticipated my next question, which is, are we using this to tease out the data? Like, who are these 11% that are unemployed? Is there a pattern as far as what sector they're in? Are there indicators of where we should invest? And of course, as always, you've anticipated it. My last question for you was in regards to the tenant rental assistance. My understanding, the program that we're working through with Maker, that still is going to be governed by kind of the HUD rules of folks that make 60% AMI or less. And I was wondering if we've looked at any rental assistance program ideas for that kind of middle class worker that might be hit hard during this period of time, that 60 to maybe 120% or 100% AMI. Have we looked into any programs for that? Have we done one and I'm spacing it, and I apologize if so.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Seitz, that is a keen focus of the CARES Act spending, the CARES Act funding that we have set aside through people and programs for people. We are actively in discussions right now with our partners, including Maker, about allowing for that assistance to go all the way up to perhaps 100 or 120% of AMI, so that we are covering a broad range of housing need across a broad range of income levels.
I don't envy your work right now. I think you're going to find a lot of need, and prioritizing how we approach it is going to be difficult, but I appreciate the due diligence your team has put into it. Thank you.
Mr. Demott.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm curious to get kind of, I know we've talked about it a couple times, but I know when we passed the mask ordinance, there was the $100,000 that was set aside from the CARES Act to give masks to the business community. And I'm curious, did we run through that already? What kind of response did we get?
Councilor Demott, I'd like to come back to you with more detailed information, but my understanding is that we were able to obtain roughly 20,000 masks. We were able to distribute roughly 15,000 initially, and that we are going out for a second time with our business community to set up times for them to come to stations where they can pick up a certain number of masks that have been reserved for them. So we're continuing to work with the business community to get those facial coverings out.
That's good to hear. I would love to get more detail about exactly where that budget is when you can gather those details for us. The other thing that I'm curious about is, at what point and I'm not sure who this question is for, it actually might be for Don. But you talked about how we've kind of leveled out and we've seen spikes in other areas. I'm not sure where we are in actual hospital beds versus cases, because I know that's two different things. with the varying levels of this, the way this virus affects people. But I'm just curious when we reevaluate the mask mandate. And the reason I ask is I know some of our neighbors, one of the ones that was first out of the gate with a mask mandate has went to more of a recommendation. They're still recommending it, but they're not quote unquote mandating it. So I'm just, it got me thinking, when will we evaluate whether or not we want to continue that mandate, or if there's going to be a different phase of that for us, or if the team's talking about that?
Thank you, Councilor Demott, for the question. Interesting that you asked, because just today I was having a conversation with the city attorney about a related issue to this. And if you would, please give us a couple days and we're going to get back to you with some thoughts we have on how the order maybe should be amended to account for the practical application of the order in open restaurants now, and what's actually going on in those open restaurants. And also we'll take a look at what the state CDPHE and our county health departments are saying in terms of masks today. I could quote what I'm seeing on news stations and national reports, but I'll get our local information and we'll get something back to you by the end of this week.
That would be great. I appreciate it. I know it's interesting. I've luckily got to visit some of our local restaurants that have been able to open up, and the transportation from the front door to your table is kind of interesting. So I'll be interested to hear what you guys come back with. Thank you.
Mr. Bowles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to very briefly thank everyone on the team for their work on this. It's your continued hard work is much appreciated. As Governor Pola said, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So we're in this for the long haul, and thank you for your continued hard work, the entire team. Much appreciated. I want to commend staff, our team, for their efforts in developing partnerships. I think that was early on a discussion we had, and Director Hall just mentioned it. It's outstanding, great work with developing partnerships in our community. I think that's very important. And then also your continued commitment to transparency through this report and the reporting you do, and keeping us up to date, but then also through this, allowing our public and our residents to have access to it as well. So thank you for that. I would just had one comment or one question. During the part of the long-term prognosis, will we compare our data to surrounding or comparable cities in our area to know if we're significantly higher in unemployment? Why is that? Is there someone else doing something that we might be able to replicate here? Or is there something we're doing that's really great that we should let other cities know because we're far ahead of them? So is that something we would ever consider in the long-term prognosis, is looking at how those figures or those statistics compare to cities like our city around the region? Thank you.
Councilor Bowles, I think you've raised a really interesting question. I'm going to jump in, although Mr. Hall may want to add to this, or even Mr. Kirschbaum, but I just want to make an observation. One of the regional, I would say, communication cultural changes is that there's not a day that goes by that I don't have a conversation with the city manager in another jurisdiction, and we have regular meetings where we're discussing these very issues. The same is happening with the finance directors and the economic development directors. And so I know we have a number of staff in many disciplines who are comparing notes on almost a daily basis with some of our other jurisdictions. But we haven't gotten to the point of the action of the after event report that you're referring to here. We're doing that, as you recall, with the contract that we are doing through the police department, and that may be something they can be looking at too. But I think it's a great thought because we are learning on an almost daily basis what different things that are happening in other cities and how their economy and their communities are responding to those. So we'll follow up more on that issue. John or Max or anyone who wants to add, please go ahead.
Thank you, Don. This is John Hall, Economic Development Director. And I want to echo a little bit of what Don said and just assure you that I speak with my counterparts in 15 to 20 different communities in the metro area on a weekly basis. We have an ongoing email chain about best practices, if you want to call them that, theft of ideas, if you want to call it that. We are working very hard as professionals to find the things that work the best, the things that don't work, the problems that we run into, and the common challenges that we have. To your question, though, I would say that largely the problems look very similar across most jurisdictions. My group is heavily focused north of I-70. And so if you think about those communities in the Northwest corridor, they tend to look very similar in their economic structure. There are some differences as you move east, and we talk about those differences, but we are working very closely together on a variety of things. But most of it is idea sharing and discussing how we best expand what we recognize are very limited resources.
Well, very good. Thank you for that answer. I appreciate that, gentlemen. Thank you for your leadership and acting regionally and working with our neighbors and showing leadership in our area. Thank you.
Mr. Franklin, you had a comment you'd like to make?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Dave Frankel, the City Attorney. I just wanted to add to Mr. Tripp's comment earlier. I absolutely will be looking at the face covering order, particularly in light of the 7th amended Safer at Home order that the CDPHE issued at the end of last week, and an executive order that the governor issued updating his face coverings. So we will definitely be taking into account the current state of the state orders. Also anticipating that within the next week, we anticipate a new order coming out that would transition from Safer at Home to Protect Our Neighbors, which we understand will be a more relaxed state of restrictions to facilitate additional opening of the economy.
Any other questions or comments from council on any of the 4 items that were done for the COVID updates?
Mr. Mayor, we actually have one more update for you, number 4.
Mr. Hall, is this yours?
No, it's not, Mayor. Maybe I'll jump in here. No, this item comes as a consequence of a question we had from a counselor concerning the process related to business licenses and tax communication with our businesses. And so I've got the city clerk and others prepped here, and including, I believe, Tammy in finance, to make a short presentation to you to help answer some of Councilor Smith's questions and questions others may have.
All right, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Tripp. As City Manager Tripp has mentioned, we put this together to answer some questions regarding the process for business licenses in the City of Westminster, as well as sales and use tax. And so I'm going to start off with some real basics just to get everybody on the same page about our business license process. What you're looking at in this slide is our business registration application or form. If you're a new business in the City of Westminster, having never done business here before, this would be the first step and where you would start. Essentially, what we do with this business registration form is collect data surrounding that particular business, the people who are running the business, where they are in the city, the type of business that they'll be engaging in, and we put it through a series of departments for review. And this is how you would become a business in good standing or compliant in our city. As you can see from the form, there's a lot to it, but we do give folks a lot of direction on why we have this form, what we do with it, and what they should do next. Next slide, please. So with this form, a potential business owner would be given, of course, the first 2 pages, which are what we would collect from them and then enter into our database. But we also give them a lot of general information and instruction on why they're engaging in this process, how we use their information, how they should keep current and in good standing, and also what other considerations they should be considering. We also give them some tips and tricks and other places and other agencies that they might have to visit. So first and foremost, the first square on your upper left-hand side talks about the purpose of this form. The form is used for persons engaged in business in the City of Westminster to register and obtain appropriate license. Why is that important? That is important so that we ensure that everyone within our city limits is compliant with things like zoning and land use code, that they are submitting the appropriate sales taxes, both to us locally as well to the state, and remain in good standing there. Also that their business physical premise, their actual location meets the fire code and many other reasons. Those are just to name a few. Some of the things that we do with this information also is we feed this into our public safety departments, specifically the police department and the fire department, to ensure that should any type of emergency occur at their business site, that our first responders know how to contact them, how to notify them of what is happening should that ever occur. The second red square that you see towards the bottom right talks a little bit more about the review and approval process. A variety of city departments, as I said, actually review business license applications before they are ever finalized, approved, and sent to a business. We ask businesses to give us approximately 3 to 4 weeks. Many times we beat that estimate, but depending on each individual situation, it's a pretty good estimate of time of how long it takes to move through the various departments. The other thing I want to talk about is over here on your right side. We encourage folks to keep their information up to date. And again, just to reiterate, this information is shared all across departments in the city. Economic development gets this information, planning, building, of course, the city clerk's office, police and fire, our code enforcement division, and lots of others who are making sure that they maintain regulatory compliance. We also talk to them a little bit about sales tax and paying Westminster taxes, and I'll let Tammy Hitchens, our Director of Finance, move into that here in just a moment. But we also do talk to them about other state organizations and agencies that they may need to register with, such as the Secretary of State, and submitting any kind of state tax if it's applicable. County taxes. Lots of information in this form, really kind of packed in there. Give me just a second. Page 2 of that form, and again, there's a lot of information here, and I'm not going to go over this point by point with you, but page 2 of that also starts to give, some helpful notes, things surrounding how to remain in good standing and the things that you need to know if you're a business in the City of Westminster. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, you can go back, Matt, apologies. But I did want to just address a couple of specific questions regarding business licensing in our city. One of the questions was, do most cities require a business license? And the answer to that is yes, absolutely. Almost, I would say, a vast majority of local governments, municipalities across the nation require this type of license in some form or another. One of the things that we do differently in the City of Westminster is we don't charge a fee for our business licenses. Many do. And that is because we think it encourages compliance. And I will note that we have discussed multiple times whether we should charge for business licenses, but at this time they remain free of charge. And we try very hard to work with our individual businesses to make sure that they come into compliance with our rules and regulations surrounding business licenses. Another question was, how would you know if you need a city business license? If you are a business owner, part of doing your legal due diligence is possibly as easy as just doing a Google search. Multiple resources are available online, of course, our own City of Westminster website, but many external agencies, many information checklists are available, including the Secretary of State's office. There's an organization called My Biz Colorado. Even our Westminster Chamber of Commerce holds a link within their website directly to our business registration form. So there are many resources that would point a business owner in the right direction in terms of coming into compliance with the municipality that they are operating in. Another question that we wanted to address was, if you open a small business in the City of Westminster, what would it take to be in good standing? And I think that making sure that you go through the business license process, which, just to reiterate, touches multiple divisions and departments within the city. Not only are you submitting a form to the city clerk's office that we then enter into a database, but you're also getting a review from our community development department, making sure that you have the correct land use and zoning, and that you're allowed to do the type of business in the location that you wish to do your business in. Our sales tax division in the finance department, etc. So once you go through the entire business license process and have set up a sales tax account with the city, you would be considered in good standing at that time. And you would receive your business license at the time that we determine you can move forward with your business. And then finally, there was a question asking to define and describe the business license. And I think that I will just go back to what we have in our general instructions for our business registration, which is what that purpose of the form is. The purpose of the form is to make sure that every business in the city is holding the appropriate license, has gone through the proper review through all of our city departments, and then has finally been approved to do the type of business that they are planning to do within our city in the physical premise that they have secured for that business. And I may have missed some. I apologize. I'm kind of going through these pretty quickly. But at this point, I think I'm going to hand it over to Tammy. I think that has everything about business licenses that I intended to present to you. And of course, we'll take questions at the end of this presentation, should you have any.
Okay, Tammy Hitchens, Finance Director. Matt, please switch the slide, please. So one of the questions was asked is, how does a business know what they need to do from a sales and use tax license perspective? And yeah, I guess even going back a little step further, one of the questions is why, define a sales and use tax license. So one thing that we have to remember is that we actually have a sales and use tax license as basically the authority for a particular vendor to collect our tax. We want to make sure that, I as a consumer, I go into the local store, they charge me sales tax, I see their business license that says they have a license with the City of Westminster, so they are legally okay and obligated to collect that tax, and it's not just extra profit to their bottom line. Basically what that license is an agreement that they're going to remit the sales and use tax to the city. So that's kind of a basic premise of what the sales and use tax license does. We do have a voluntary tax system with compliance oversight, which means that, there's no way that we know every business that comes into the city. And one of the questions is like, how do we know? Well, we have ways that we can find out. We see ribbon cuttings with, say, the Westminster Chamber of Commerce, or we might have a revenue agent who goes out to a business to maybe do collections, and they're in a tower, and they can look and see like all the names that are in the tower and go back and do a check to see if they have actually licensed with the city. The other thing we get is, great as it sounds, is like, oh man, did you go over to the new, X store and get that? It's like, well, I didn't even know we had an X store. So, we get tips along the way as far as new businesses that are starting as well. So there's a lot of ways that we can find out, but the bottom line is if we actually rely on the voluntary compliance of a new business coming into town to really know if a new business is starting. And, and so one of the, particularly about Westminster sales and use taxes, I shared with you last week that about 55.4%, I believe it was, of our total governmental revenues come from sales and use taxes. And of that, 65% of our general fund revenue is from sales and use taxes. So I mean, it's extremely important to us to get and collect these sales and use taxes. Of that amount, about 17.5 million of that is for public safety. So very important to us. It's very important that we are able to receive the taxes that are fair. We actually look at ourselves as providing a level playing field and working with businesses so that there's not a business who gets an unfair economic advantage because they are or are not collecting sales taxes in the proper way. And so that's kind of the base of why we have sales and use tax licenses and what they mean for us. And if I think Michelle kind of covered why, how a business would know that they needed to have one, and that's through doing their due diligence. And I'll then now turn it over to John Hall about the Westy Rise program, and of course we'll be available for questions at the conclusion of that. Oh, actually, I got one more thing. So this is our website. We've got a couple slides here. So you can see under business all these opportunities or even economic development, but you see where it has Westminster taxes, business and sales tax licenses. So any kind of information that you would need to know about filing your taxes or what needs to be included in your taxes, the tax forms, and all of that would be right here on this page. And Matt, please advance the slides. Here it has again some of the business and sales tax license. We have a very robust internet pages for people to understand what it is that we're looking for. We've got, as Michelle talked about, we've got there's certain types of license where you have to get an extra license, like a liquor license per se. And then Matt, one more slide, please. And so then here is actually even more information on our website that talks about our sales and use tax information. It gives Westminster tax publications where you can go in there and it'll have a specific subject matter that you could look at, as well as where we go on and do our online tax filing. So, and of course, at the end of all of this, if in fact someone still has questions, we are always happy to help and assist all of our new businesses if they have any of those types of questions via phone call. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Tammy. John Hall again, Economic Development Director. And I just want to pick up a couple of other questions that were outstanding, and then all three of us would be happy to answer any additional questions council may have. One question that was asked is if we could confirm the business grant requirements for Broomfield. And Broomfield created a program called their Enhanced Broomfield Modified Grant Program. And on their Enhanced Broomfield website, they have a detail of the eligibility guidelines for their program, which includes businesses being located and operating in Broomfield. Number two, that they're in good standing with both the city and county of Broomfield and the Colorado Secretary of State. And they give as an example, not being in default on any taxes. They must provide services to Broomfield residents or produce goods or products within Broomfield. They limited the maximum number of employees to 25 as being an eligible enterprise for their program. They also required a demonstrated business or financing need, including but not limited to documented loss of future contracts, orders, or sales, previous monthly financial statements for February 2020, and if available, any and all months in 2019 and 2020, a summary of accounts and financial resources on hand, such as funds on deposit or other easily liquid assets. Their application had to demonstrate a business strategy for ensuring or returning to business viability through 2020. This could include a summary business plan, evidence of access to or a commitment of other capital resources to ensure business sustainability, such as letters of commitment from financing lenders or equity investors, and an explanation on the intended use of the business support funds, which may include business expenses such as payroll, inventory, lease, rent, or utilities. And preference is given in their program to locally owned and operated businesses. Finally, the question was asked if, in our case, in future possible rounds of business grants, will the March 1st date for good standing change? It certainly could. We have, for the Westie Rise and Dine program, which is a restaurant-focused program, we kept the date at March 1st because we felt that the vast majority of businesses would have the best opportunity to qualify as being good standing on March 1st, prior to the advent of COVID and the stay-at-home orders, public health orders, which severely restricted their ability to operate. Finally, with respect to the March 1st deadline and staff's recommendation to council for the use of that deadline, we did come before council on April 6th to seek direction on the program. We also came back on June 1st, 2020 to seek council direction on the continued requirement in our programs that businesses had to be in good standing as of March 1st, that is, have a business license as of March 1st to be eligible for reconsideration for any activity for which they may not have been in compliance. So with that, I think we're happy to answer any questions.
And council, is there any questions on the reports made on items 10, 1, 2, 3, and 4? Ms. Smith.
Thank you for that comprehensive overview. To all of you, to Michelle, to Tammy, John, thank you so much for walking through the process and allowing for a better understanding. This was my questions for staff, and part of me bringing it forward was to help reduce that red tape. We all know, working in government, it can be a nuance as far as who to talk with, and it's very clear that that applying for these business license, can touch multiple departments and many people. And so what I would like to see us do, and what I now understand, and Michelle, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but is that they can directly go to you to then be filtered through staff for questions and answers. From what I understand, and I think it was Mr. Tripp's verbiage as far as a concierge type service. So if that's the case, then I would very much like to continue to see that, because we all know being passed from one person to another can be very trying and very difficult, very frustrating. So with that, I do have just a few other questions. If someone applies for state tax, sales tax, does that then trigger Westminster in their sales tax and getting that registered then? And if not, I'm assuming if you set it up through the state, then you also have to set it up through the city that you're in. So that's one question. And then my question on the deadline, as far as I'd like to know how many, at our first and second look of this, how many were in good, poor standing or not in good standing, I should say. And then how many since this opening have we lifted into a good standing status, that we've worked with our businesses, our small businesses, on providing the information that they might need in order to fill in the missing pieces. So I'd like to have a better understanding of that. And then the deadline, as far as, okay, if they're in good standing, and I think I was looking more towards down the road, because I know requirements are requirements. I get that. I'm not asking for any kind of exceptions or anything. But I'm looking like down the road, let's say that this unfortunate event happens again where we shut down everything. What does that look like then? Are we still keeping a March 1st date, or are we pivoting and moving towards a different date? And what would that look like towards staff on providing that deadline, that those maybe who weren't in good standing now can be in that application process to be in a good standing status, and then apply, and then potentially receive any potential grants that we might offer. So I know that's kind of all encompassing, and I'm available to repeat it, but those are my last remaining questions that I have.
So this is Tammy Hitchens, and I'll attempt to answer some of the questions. So they would, a business person would have to actually apply with us as well as the state. There is not a cross in that. But the other side, is, and just maybe a point of clarification, they literally fill out one form, which was the form Ms. Parker was showing us. And then we actually send it through the process to get all of the other different departments to look at it. It's not that they have to, first apply to the city clerk's office, and then they have to go to the fire department, and they have to come to the sales tax division and stuff. It's one form, and it gets routed through the city, but the potential business has to just fill out one form.
Okay.
That's correct. Thanks, Tammy. I was actually going to jump in, and that is exactly how the process works. And just to elaborate a little bit more, most business license applications go through this process, and we have 2 points of contact, and that is when we receive that application and when we're sending out the approved business license. The only time that a potential business owner would be contacted or asked for further documentation or information is if somewhere in that review process there was some kind of problem or something that we needed to fix. So just wanted to be clear, exactly as Tammy said, the vast majority of businesses have point of contact with the city clerk's office 2 times. Once to submit that application, and then once when we let them know that they have been approved with that license. And I'll also add that we field questions all the time from folks who submit their licenses and want status updates. And we can usually tell them exactly where in the process that application is. And in fact, we do it routinely. We field questions both just from people who call the city clerk's office directly. We also have a specific mailbox set up, which is licensing@cityofwestminster.us, where we field lots of those questions as well. Thanks.
Councilor Smith and Council, this is John Hall, Economic Development Director. We had at the end of the first round 77 businesses that were not in good standing. When we came back to you and received direction to take a second look, we were able to award grants to an additional 36 businesses of those 77 who came into good standing subsequently after being notified of their issue. So those are the numbers related to the Westy Rise Business Grant Program. Now your last question is a little more speculative in nature. Sure. Because we haven't set up a new general business assistance program yet. I would like to reserve the opportunity to certainly move that good standing date based on what we observe and know in the field, so as to benefit as many businesses as we possibly can. So could that date move? Absolutely. Do I know exactly what that date would be? Not tonight as we talk through this.
Sure. And thank you for that. And I remember you did provide an update on that not good, or how many of the numbers of businesses that were not in good standing and then came into good standing. So thank you for refreshing my memory on that. But thank you for the information. This is very helpful. Obviously, if I have more questions, I'll know who to go to. So thank you very much.
Ms. Seitz?
So thank you to staff for this really almost exhaustive step-by-step how businesses go through the common practice of applying for a business license. I'm really comfortable, and I would hope that we don't, I feel like there have been a series of questions and a series of answers, and I hope that we all as a council can agree, as of the programs that exist as of today, not contemplating what might be in the future, that we understand what the metrics and what the rules were that we approved as a council, and maybe we can move forward without kind of re-going through this every week. So I hope that we're at a point where we can go forward, and it feels like that took a lot of staff time to answer.
All right, are there any other questions? Because I've already had a request for a bio break, and I want to try to get to the last item. Mr. DeMont, if you have a question, then we'll try to make this the last one.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I appreciate the fact that Councilor Smith is taking so much interest in this and being assured that the taxpayers' money is going as well as it can to all the different businesses. So I appreciate her desire to make sure that we're accommodating as many businesses as possible.
All right, if there are any other comments or questions from council? Mr. Tripp, do you want to have anything else that you want to wrap up with?
No, if anybody has any questions about anything we presented tonight, please bring those back to Cody and myself, and we'll try to follow up. There's been a lot of information provided, and I want to thank Cody for the coordination of a lot of that. It's come off, I think, very effective tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. At this point, this completes the business of the Westminster City Council meeting of June the 22nd. We still have 3 meetings left. The next item on the agenda will be for us to return to the Westminster Economic Development Authority Board of Directors. Prior to that, we will take a short pause for a bio break. We will resume in approximately 9 minutes at 9:30. We are in recess at this time. All right, Ms. Parker, can you check the council, see that everyone's back?
Certainly. Mayor Atchison,
Yes.
Councillor Demott.
Yep.
Mayor Pro Tem Sights.
Yes.
Councillor Seymour.
Yes.
Councillor Scully.
Yes.
Councillor Smith. All right, we'll try her in just one moment. Councillor Bowles.
Yes.
All right, and Councillor Smith. All right, Mayor, it looks like we're just waiting on one more.
Okay. All right, Ms. Smith, have you returned yet?
Did you need to eat anything? I might snack on something, but
And checking Councillor Smith, are you back online yet?
Should someone text her?
Ms. Parker, do you have a number you can try to see if you can reach her?
Let me work on that, Mr. Mayor. I'll do that right away.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Smith has just sent a message that she has had a technical issue with her computer battery. She is working to rejoin. If you can just all sit still for a second, she'll be right back.
All right, thanks.
As an option, could she just call in?
Sorry, folks, if you can just stand by for one more minute. I'm actually on the phone with Councillor Smith and we're getting her all set up. It should just be a couple of minutes more. Okay, we should have Lindsay back.
Hi,
Councillor,
sorry. I'm here. My computer shut off. I apologize.
All right, Mr. Tripp, if we could, let's go back, reminding people we are reconvening as the Westminster Economic Development Authority. We have a presentation on the North Huron Interceptor Sewer Project. Mr. Tripp, who's leading this one?
Max Kirschbaum, please.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp, and good evening back to the Westminster Economic Development Authority Board. This evening, you'll be receiving a presentation from Julie Kaler. I'll introduce her in a moment. I would like to start with just a couple of introductory comments, if I could. First, you might wonder, how does this North Huron Interceptor Sewer project the same or different from the Big Dry Creek Interceptor Sewer that we've also been working on over the last few years, and in fact will be coming with a contract recommendation within a month for that interceptor sewer? Well, first, let's say how it's different is geography. The Big Dry Creek Interceptor Sewer serves a basin that essentially ends at about 134th Avenue at the Big Dry Creek Wastewater Treatment Facility. The North Huron Interceptor Sewer serves the North Huron Basin, which is from the north side of that wastewater treatment plant up to the northern edge of the city boundary. So it's geography that makes them different. And what makes this project similar or the same to the Big Dry Creek Interceptor? Well, we've been working on design for both of them for a similar period of time. So this one, just like Big Dry Creek Interceptor, benefits from using and applies a similar modeling and evaluation methodology that got us to this project. Second comment I'd like to make is that this is truly an integrated city team effort that brings us here this evening with this presentation to you. At least 5 departments have devoted a great amount of effort over the last 3+ years to take us from just a concept to the project that you'll be seeing this evening, to include even the method for financing this project. So we're excited to bring it to you this evening for discussion. And with that, I'd like to introduce Julie Kaler, who is the Utilities Engineering Manager for Public Works and Utilities. She'll be presenting, it's about a 12-slide presentation. And when she is finished, I will try to help navigate any questions and direct them to the experts across our city team, should there be any questions. With that, over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Max. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. May I have the next slide, please? The purpose of the WIDA post briefing this evening is to provide information about the North Huron Interceptor Sewer Project that responds to 3 important items. 1, meets existing conditions. 2, it fulfills commitments that the city made to the Orchard mixed-use development area. And 3, it anticipates infrastructure needs to allow land south of the Orchard to proceed with plans for those parcels. Next slide, please. So where and what is this project? Max talked about the area a little bit, but on the figure to the right, there's a red boundary that shows the North Huron I-25 focus area, east of Huron Street, but west of I-25, north of 134th, and south of 148th Avenue. The North Huron Interceptor Sewer Project will replace an existing sewer system that is over capacity. Over capacity means the pipe is too small compared to the flow that it carries. The total cost of the construction phase is $16,441,817. The project is more expensive than anticipated back in 2017 because the project scope increased so the city can set the entire urban renewal area up for success. Next slide, please. The North Huron project responds to existing conditions. Staff used hydraulic modeling to understand the sewer system. We've determined that the interceptor pipelines highlighted in yellow are too full and must be upsized to increase capacity. Super important, the interceptor is over capacity right now, and doing nothing is not an option. Next. The North Huron project fulfills the commitments to the orchard and anticipates infrastructure needs south of the orchard. In 2017, City Council passed a commitment to support the orchard mixed-use development. Part of that commitment was increasing capacity in the sewer system. A multi-departmental team selected a preferred scenario that includes future development with proper consideration for water, wastewater, and infrastructure. Next slide, please. The North Huron Interceptor Sewer innovates funding for this infrastructure project. Utility customer rate revenues are not being used to support this capital improvements project. These sewer improvements are located within WHEDA's North Huron Urban Renewal Area, abbreviated URA. URA funds are an allowable use for public improvements and facilities, and URA funds are available. 100% of funding comes from property tax revenues generated by development in this area. In fact, URA funds have paid for engineering services up to now. Next slide, please. The North Huron URA plan objectives include not only water, sewer, and other facilities, but they provide an efficient system of streets, road, and transportation, adequate drainage, stormwater type stuff, eliminating adverse conditions of title that impede development, and provides employment opportunities in an attractive setting. Next slide, please. Our current COVID situation does not change staff's view of the critical need for this project. The project responds to the three important items that I outlined in the first slide and gave a little bit of detail on. It relieves capacity constraints that the interceptor is experiencing now. URA funds are available. The city has a good bid that is the most cost-effective approach for the city right now. As I said, the total cost of the construction phase is over $16 million. And I wrote as of today because the bid will expire in early July. And we've communicated with our construction team. They know that I'm talking with you tonight, and I anticipate talking with them tomorrow. And staff believes that a rebid would cost at least 15% or more, depending on the duration of the delay. Next slide, please. The next steps for North Huron Interceptor Sewer. Staff anticipates returning to City Council and the WHEDA Board in July for 2 readings. For consideration of the construction phase, we will bring a construction contract, an amendment for engineering services, and an appropriation of WIDA funds to construct the project. That's my presentation for this evening. And as Max said, we would be happy to try to respond to questions.
So Julie, in regards to your comment, you're going to be meeting with the bidder tomorrow. In anticipation, if the council says that they support this, do you believe that the bidder is willing to hold until we can get through the final 2 readings in July? Or do you think they're going to go ahead with a cost increase if we don't do something positive by the first week of July?
In a conversation last week, we asked the general contractor for a 45-day no-cost bid extension. That was my first ask. I think coming to you tonight and being allowed to present is a real strong show of faith, and should council accept that we return in July, I think we have a much better chance of holding our bid than a different scenario.
Okay. Mr. Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just have some foundational questions, and I apologize if I missed this, but when was this interceptor system first laid out in the ground? And at that time, what did we see as the growth in that area, and was the orchard and then was it part of that timeline? And then was the expansion of St. Anthony's also anticipated at that point?
Board Member Seymour, this is Max Kirschbaum. Julie, if you could start maybe the answer there in terms of the age of the existing system, and then perhaps either Dave Downing or John Hall might want to comment on the state of the comprehensive plan at that time versus where we are today.
Thank you, Max. This original sewer, there are segments that date from the 1970s, but most of it is 1980s and early 1990s construction.
Thank you.
So this is Dave Downing, Mr. Seymour. It's probably not necessary for me to tell you, based on that information, the orchard and St. Anthony's were not even contemplated at that time.
Okay, that's a critical part of that, and then plus now we have the developments next to St. Anthony's and then further south. So I appreciate that history on that. Thank you. That's my questions.
All right, Mr. DeMott.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a handful of questions. First, I'm trying to understand some timeline here. So this sounds like, I remember when the particular development you mentioned was approved in May of 2017, which was right before Councilor Scully and I were elected. And I remember in the time I've been on council, we've talked about the change of use that's went on at the orchard that has caused more need for sewer capacity, with a lot more restaurants going in up there than what was originally in there. But with that being said, there's been a lot of businesses that have closed up there. So I'm trying to understand, when was this review done of the flows? I'm a little troubled, to be quite frank. I mean, I've been on council during a time when we were under a moratorium because of this very thing that you're saying is going on in this interceptor. So I'm trying to understand some timeline and what I'm trying to process through what I was just told.
So Board Member DeMott, this is Max Kirschbaum again. Let me start by indicating that in 2017 when the development agreement was signed and approved by council with Vestar Development as it pertained to changes that they anticipated and were planning to make both for residential housing and commercial activity. That was the genesis of the work that we undertook to examine this interceptor sewer to make sure that it could meet the requirements laid out in that development agreement. We quickly realized that there would be additional work necessary just to meet work going on within that Orchard Town Center development, as well as then becoming mindful of the work of projects that are in not only in the St. Anthony area, but to all of the yet to be improved or yet unimproved areas south of St. Anthony, north of the wastewater treatment plant. So this is a culmination of evaluating the needs as they exist to serve that commercial district as it is, as well as those that are contemplated south of the Orchard Town Center and St. Anthony's Hospital campus. Dave or John, anything that I missed there you might want to add in?
It doesn't sound like they do, but I'm still kind of curious. So the flow volumes that were just spoke about in the presentation, do we know when those were observed? I mean, how old is that? And do we know how many businesses up in the Orchard have closed? I could think of a couple off the top of my head. I actually was up there this last week and, was surprised at how many open shops there are up there.
All the modeling that we did for this engineering work was between 2017 and right up to the time of bidding this project. In route along the way, we even paused this project for a period of time to make sure that we were applying all the lessons learned in the Big Dry Creek Interceptor, including the modeling and methodology. So it is current. Does it reflect a business opening or closing within the last short period? It would not reflect a change that has taken place since this project went to bid.
Okay. I guess the other thing two other things that I'm curious about. One is, are we sure with the approval of this gives us capacity to the point of build out of that area is my first question. And the other thing is I'm just trying to understand the urgency here all of a sudden. I mean, I understand the urgency of not wanting it to be 15% more, but why all of a sudden did this pop up in the fashion that, oh, we've got to get this done in the next 2 weeks in order to avoid a 15% increase?
Julie, do you want to take the first at the first part of that question, please?
Regarding the capacity to build out?
Correct.
So the size and the plan for the project does anticipate future possible scenarios, with the caveat that we have to have proper consideration for water supply, water infrastructure, and wastewater infrastructure. But we do anticipate the future. It's not simply for today and the next 6 months.
And along those same lines, does the structure of the way that you guys are thinking this is going to be financed, especially with what's going on in the economy, like how long does it take to pay this off of the property tax, and in conjunction with how long these improvements will be still good in the ground where we're not looking at replacement?
Before I get to that question, can I, let me go back to your intermediate question regarding why does it appear to be an urgency? We, as always, all of our standard bid acceptance periods are for 100 days. So we're at about the 90-day mark on that bid acceptance period, and because of the pandemic situation that we have found ourselves in since the time of that bid opening, we've taken extra effort and care to make sure that our forecasting and our modeling is in fact correct, and that our assessment to move forward in the construction market especially for horizontal type construction, that we are making the best move to execute this contract and move forward. That's why we did present that. We went through an assessment of what we think would happen if we didn't proceed. So over the last 90 days, we've been stepping through those analyses to make sure we were moving in the right direction. As far as your question about the WIDA funding and payoff, perhaps John Hall might speak to that first, or maybe even Larry or Tammy in terms of the cash or debt question.
Councilor Demott, John Hall, Economic Development Director, and maybe I can touch on a couple of things here that I didn't quite make it into the conversation quickly enough earlier in some of your questions. So we have seen some closures of some businesses at the Orchard. However, in this kind of modeling and with this kind of investment, when you're looking over 20 and 30-year time horizons, the closure of a business for a short period of time is a relatively, I don't want to say that it's not relevant, because it is relevant, but the structure still stands, and you have to operate from the assumption that at some point it will be reoccupied, and flow from that facility would continue into the sewer system. And so the sewer system would need that capacity to continue safe operations. So I would start there with just thinking in a little bit longer time horizons than we normally do around business activity. I'm confident we will continue to see business activity at the Orchard and moving south of there. With respect to the financing approach, this urban renewal districts in Colorado have a 25-year life. This one has a life until, I believe, 2028. So it has about 8 more years left. There has been a significant amount of investment, that is, capital investments taking place in that area, and has generated a significant amount of revenue and continues to do so in the form of property taxes. So it is the property tax revenue from development that has taken place in the district that will provide the revenue to fund this infrastructure improvement. If you have more specific questions about how that would happen, whether that's bonding or cash or how that would happen, I would suggest, as Max did, that either Deputy City Manager Larry Dorr or Finance Director Tammy Hitchens could answer those questions.
I think what I'm really getting at is so 8 years, is that enough time to pay this off? Like, are we, right now it's not gonna come out of the utility payments, but is 8 years enough time for it to come out of the URA? Because that's what you're putting forward to us, is to pay for it out of those property tax dollars, like you just mentioned. So I just want to understand the long-term effect of actually paying for this large investment.
Yeah, Councilor Demott, let me go ahead and attempt to announce that or address that. I beg your pardon, and thank you, Director Hall. This is Larry Dorr, Deputy City Manager and Chief Financial Officer. This project has been a plan for a good period of time now and organized, and it's been planned for as a pay-as-you-go funded project, meaning a cash on hand and revenues to be collected during this year during the construction phase of the project. So it will be it is a cash funded project. It won't be sort of paid off with any bonds or lease purchase financing. So there won't be any leverage involved in this. This will be a cash pay-as-you-go project, similar to most of the city's general capital improvement fund projects. So yes, this will be a pay-as-you-go and again, financed essentially by the properties within the Urban Renewal Authority area.
Great. That answers my questions. Thank you very much.
Ms. Seitz?
Councilor Demont's questions covered mine. It was more on the financing and the URA and how long was left on that URA. I do want to say, you know, I am happy that we have a vehicle to assist us in getting these upgrades to our interceptor, our system made, because otherwise it would be our ratepayers on the hook. So we are very lucky that we have that vehicle, and it feels appropriate because we're using it for the development and improvement, so an eligible expense. I was wondering how that dovetails with our charter requirement in regards to the rates being set. So I know that there is no problem with our URA requirements for this funding to be used for this, and just double checking sure. I know you guys have already done all this work, but it also is in compliance with our charter and the fact that it's an enterprise fund. Is that correct?
Board member Seitz, I think Tammy Hitchens might be best able to answer that. I think what you might have been getting at was, are there Tabor type implications, or does this in any way jeopardize the status of the enterprise fund of the utility? I think
correct.
It's actually, I think that because of the legal implication here, I'm going to turn to Dave Frankel and have Tammy fill in from there. But Dave, would you specifically hit on this question of charter requirements of the utility?
Absolutely, Don. Dave Frankel, City Attorney. And also on the line is Malcolm Murray, our Urban Renewal Counsel. May look to Malcolm as well for this, but having evaluated the urban renewal funding that is available for these improvements, I don't believe that creates a Tabor problem for the enterprise itself, because the improvements are going to be constructed by a different entity using different funding, and the utility is not going to be the beneficiary of a cash transfer from an outside account. So I believe the enterprise status is intact with this project moving forward. Relative to charter specific questions on the utility, our charter does obviously mandate that the rates be set in a manner to cover the costs of operating the utility, and I don't believe this impairs that in any way, because this is a separate project. And the other issue on the charter would be the utility debt that it issues must be covered by ratepayers, and therefore rates have to be adequately set, and bond conditions mandate that. So I don't believe that this project, if approved, would in any way violate the charter as to that issue. But I would give Malcolm Murray a chance to correct me if he believes I've misstated the urban renewal aspects of this. Malcolm?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I would agree with you, Dave. It shouldn't have any implications. And as long as the URA, the TIF money is available, that should work out just fine.
And then I have a follow-up question. My presumption is there's not the capacity for this, or it was not appropriate use of dollars, but did we consider using like a prorated down payment towards improvements at the Big Dry Creek wastewater treatment facility? So some of these dollars to help expand the capacity there, because maybe I'm misremembering, but I believe that was a pinch point as well.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question? I didn't catch the connection to the plant.
My apologies. So obviously we're using these dollars for the interceptor, for those yellow highlighted areas where we're beyond capacity. I was wondering, because that will also impact when we have more growth and development, the capacity needs at the Big Dry Creek wastewater treatment center. Could we use, if there are any additional TIF funds to set away to assist with that expansion effort? Does that make sense, or am I unclear? It's a related expense to the.
Yes, I think I follow the question now. Julie may be able to comment better on the expected capacity at the plant, but we measure plant capacity in two different ways. One is a flow measurement, and the other is based on a technical term of biochemical oxygen demand component. At this stage, the anticipated work within North Huron doesn't tip the decision for additional capacity of the plant. Julie, can you comment further on that?
No, I agree with you, Max, that anticipated flow in BOD does not push the whole plant into a situation. I will add that engineering effort has also worked on the lift stations at the Big Dry Creek wastewater treatment facility. So once the pipeline enters the plant site, 2 separate pumping stations pump the sewage to the next process. And part of the work contemplated is to continue the design of this lift station using URA funds, and if appropriate, use URA funds to make improvements to the lift station. But that is a future discussion for a future day.
Thank you. That fully answers my question, and the question that I wasn't smart enough to ask as well, which the meat of it was, were we looking for additional future needs and using these dollars? And it sounds like, of course, you were ahead of it. So thank you very much.
Are there other questions by a member of the council? I'm sorry, the board.
Mr. Mayor, I would just like to close our staff comments by saying 2 things. Number 1, thank goodness for the orchard. That development helped replace the declining downtown, and it has allowed us in the last generation or so to have enough revenues to do the things we've been doing in the city. And thank goodness that we have understood that needed to pivot towards an entertainment-based restaurant, sort of a retail operation. And we did so ahead of, depending completely on soft goods retail. We have a good partner in the developer that has made improvements, and our economic development staff has worked with them to have that become solid. And it's been pretty solid for us through this pandemic. I'd also like to say that the URA in this case it worked exactly like it should. We've been able to capture the new revenues to make public improvements that were necessary because of the support those improvements provided to those new revenues. So I think it's a good way for us to get the improvements that are necessary and not go back to the ratepayer, but use funds that are available from that development. So we recommend approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tripp. One of the things that Councilor Demott had made some Alec alluded to is that we have had changes in the use of the property up there at the orchard. As we saw the Simons property in Thornton start to open up, we saw a big change in our market up there, going from less soft goods, moving over to an outlet mall, and being backfilled with restaurants and entertainment, which then put a bigger tax on our facilities that we'd had not anticipated when the original drawings and applications were made, because they were made based on retail. But as retail starts to change, and we're going to see continued based on what we've talked about with the orchard ownership and people south of there, and even St. Anthony still has 3 buildings yet to be built up there, which are in the long range plan, but we don't know how soon those are going to come online. We do know that we're getting close to breaking ground on one new one right at the hospital, but then there's 2 more south of there. And there's a number of developers who are still looking at opportunities to develop the property between roughly 144th and 136th, that based on where they're at today, we don't know how soon they'll come. But I think the important part of this too is that the system that has been identified, this is not new. And as Councilor Demott alluded, this was part of the time that we took out on the moratorium to go look at these kind of issues and get to the decision point of where we're at. I understand that we have the funds available and the URA. That's exactly what the funds are there for. This is no increase to our consumers. And this makes a good investment in making sure we can provide long-term service there. If there are no other comments, I'm going to poll the council to ask if they are prepared for this to be brought forward to the July timeframe. And then we will see where we go from there. So Councilor Demott?
Yes.
Councilor Sykes?
Yes.
Councilor Seymour?
Yes.
Councilor Scully?
Yes.
Councilor Smith?
Yes.
Councilor Bowles?
Yes.
And the mayor as well. Staff, please get these to us as soon as possible. Julie, thank you for the work you've been doing on this, and hopefully we can hold the price with the contractors based on the decision made by council tonight. Are there any other items, Mr. Tripp, for the WIDA group?
No, sir.
All right, you have everything you need. You have everything you need, Mr. Tripp, for that one?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we will adjourn as the Westminster Economic Development Authority. We will reconvene now as the Westminster City Council. We have one public item. This is the dealing with the application of people who are wanting to apply for Colorado Municipal League. And then after that, we will have an executive session. So council, I will ask you to turn to your packets. And you were presented the bios and recommendations for all the people who have applied to be considered for the Colorado Municipal League Executive Board of Directors. There are 4 categories that people were applying in. First one is municipalities with a population of 250,000 or more. The second was population of at least 60,000 but less than 250. The third was over 8,000 but less than 60. And the final one was populations of 8,000 or less. So in the first category, populations of over 250,000, there is only one applicant, Ms. Juanette Massey, Colorado Springs City Attorney. Is there any objection from council to continue to support this application of this individual in that category? Seeing no response from council, we'll move forward to the next group. Municipalities of population of at least 60,000 but less than 250. There are 4 applicants for this position. The first is Larry Atencio, the Pueblo City Council, John Marriott, Arvada City Council, Andrea Sampson, Loveland Council, and Jessica Sandrin, Thornton City Council. Ms. Sykes, you have any comments on this category?
I do. I want to make sure my colleagues are aware that I believe there are 3 vacancies for this particular jurisdiction. I don't believe that was in the memo, but it is the case. If we all reference the Colorado Municipal League email we got.
You're saying there are 3 openings in this category?
Correct. So I am going to read based off of the memo we received. There's 1 position for municipalities with a population of 250,000 or more, and that's a 2-year term. There are 3 positions from municipalities with a population of 60,000 but less than 250,000, and those are all 2-year terms. And there are 4 positions for the 6,000 to 60,000, and then 3 positions for 8,000, and those are both 2-year terms. And I apologize. The one that is 6,000 to 60,000, there's 3 for a 2-year term and 1 for a 1-year term.
All right, let me make sure I've got the numbers right. In the 60 to 250, there are 3 openings.
Correct. That is correct, sir.
Right. In the 8 to 60, you say there are 4?
Correct. 3 of which are 2-year terms, 1 of which is a 1-year term.
Okay. And in the last group, less than 8, there are how many?
3.
3 2-year or 1-year?
3, and they are all 2-year terms.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to the second group, 60,000 up to 250. There are 3 openings. There are 4 applicants. Are there any recommendations from any member of the group? Mr. DeMott?
Yeah, I would recommend supporting Jessica Sandgray and John Marriott.
Okay. Is there a third one you want to recommend? Since there are 3 openings.
Mr. DeMott?
Yeah, I don't know the other ones as well, so maybe I know that you served a long time on that. I'm not sure if you know the other ones, Mayor Pro Tem Sites.
I do. I'll let the others go before me.
All right. Mr. Voles, do you have any comments?
I do. Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also, Jessica Sandringham is someone from Thornton, Mayor Pro Tem of Thornton, is someone I've had a chance to work with closely, and I think she's excellent. I think she works well with people. She's a good team player and would be an excellent choice. So I would support Jessica Sandgren. Thank you.
You have any others? 2? Remember, we're selecting 3 positions.
I don't. I would be open to what other people suggest. Getting someone from Pueblo would probably, I don't know that I'm sure I've met him, but the gentleman from Pueblo, having someone from that kind of region probably would be helpful, I think, on the CML executive board. So I would probably then also, let's see, Larry, Pueblo council member. I'd probably suggest him as well.
Ms. Scully?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel like we're all just going to name all of them, but I would support Larry Atencio from Pueblo, Andrea Sampson from Loveland. I know the Disability Advisory, Affordable Housing, Homeless Advisory, just a lot of resources areas, which I really support. And then Jessica Sandgren from Thornton.
All right, Ms. Seitz, I'm going to leave you to last and get the others in first. Mr. Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too voice my opinion. John Marriott and also Jessica Sandgren, excellent candidates, and then also due to an experience level, and notwithstanding balancing out the state, Larry Atencio from Pueblo.
Okay. All right, Ms. Seitz, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would also like to see Larry Atencio retain his seat. I think he's going to offer some historic perspective. I believe he's been a very active and strong executive board member. I would also agree with my colleagues, Jessica Sandgren from Thornton, the Mayor Pro Tem, is an excellent executive board member, and I think we should keep her on there. I think she does a great job supporting our region. And then for regional diversity, I think it would be good to have Andrea Sampson and also get, you know, obviously she's not an incumbent, but I would like to get Andrea Sampson on there just to have our northern neighbors represented. So those would be my three choices.
Okay.
From
Ms.
a
Smith?
regional diversity perspective.
All right, Ms. Smith, do you have any recommendations?
I don't, other than John Marriott. That's the only person I really know and can vouch for on the names of the list. But yeah, I don't have much to add. I apologize.
Okay. I know several of these that are in here. I have had some communication with Larry in the past. I agree with most of the comments that he has served well on the board. John Marriott has some time on the city council. He's also been involved in a couple of the regional boards. Jessica Sandgren is on several regional boards as well as CML. And also, and to her point, is the only applicant from Adams County for a position on the board. My only concern with the Loveland City Council member is she's in her first 6 months of being on city council and doesn't have a lot of experience in doing this, where the other three that are in there have multiple years of service. And my personal thing is I would like to see her get a little bit more experience in the city government before she goes on to the executive board. Are there any other comments or questions? Otherwise, I'm going to read off what I've got as far as people who have
This
indicated.
is Anita. I apologize. I just jumped the queue.
Well, let me get back, see if I can figure out where we're at now. All right, John, I think you've had your comments. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, thank you.
Catherine, what about you?
Yes, sir. I've had my comments.
All right, the sites you had, Mr. Seymour. I got yours.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. DeMott, we have all of yours.
I just was, because I didn't give a third choice, I would support your, what sounds like the majority of council with the member from Pueblo in addition to Jessica Sangre and John Marriott.
Okay, no, Ms. Seitz, back to you again.
I was just going to say I can live with that. So I wanted to have some regional diversity. I think that's always what CML is looking for because we are such a big state and we have different issues. So it's always nice to have those voices. But I can be persuaded.
All right, by the count of those who have expressed an opinion, the top people are Larry Atencio, John Marriott, and Jessica Sandgren for the three openings there. Is there any objection to those? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the next group. Municipalities with a population of 8,000 to 60,000. Again, 4 positions, 1, 2, 3, open. And the only question really is, who gets the 1-year term? Because there are 4 positions and there are 4 applicants. There's Leah Dosman out of Wheat Ridge, Kathy Meyer, council member from Steamboat Springs, Darren Tangman from Woodland Park, the city manager, and Charles Willman from Glenwood Springs. Mr. DeMott.
It may make sense to have Leah Dosman get the 1 year because I believe she's on the same cycle as Councilor Scully and I. So I think she's 1 year from having to run for re-election. So she may make sense to have the 1 year term.
All right. Any other comments, Ms. Seitz?
This isn't, I was just going to say we could put the city manager on the 1-year term, but I'm fine with Councilor DeMont's logic.
Okay, any other comments from the council? And otherwise, we've got 4 positions and we have 4 applicants. And the recommendation is to recommend to the board that Leah Dostman get the 1-year term and the other 3 get 2-year terms. Any other comments in regard to that one? Mr. DeMont?
I just was going to say, Mr. Mayor, that I'd like to make a motion to extend for half an hour because we're at 10:30.
Yeah, I'm going to come up to it. I'm going to get through one more item, then we'll be going into the executive session.
Okay.
All right, can we wrap this one up that we have a recommendation to the board for the 3 2-year terms would be Meyer, Tangman, and Willman, and the 1-year would be Dostman. Is any comments or questions there? All right, let's move on to the last item. We have populations of less than 8,000. We have 3 2-year terms. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 applicants for 3 positions. Any comments or recommendations from anyone? Ms. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to nominate Don Wilson. I've worked with him over the past year on several things, and I think he's doing well in his community for Monument Mayor. They've had, seems like several challenges that they're all working through, but I think he would be seasoned and well posed for this position.
Do you have any other recommendations?
No, sir, he's really the only one I have enough information to nominate on this list.
Okay, Ms. Sykes, you're next.
So I think it's always important to read through all of the folks and not just go with who we know personally. I was going to recommend again that we look at geographic diversity, making sure different types of communities are represented. So I was wondering if I could encourage my colleagues, let's maybe in the absence of knowing these people directly, maybe we could consider that as a metric, kind of making sure we're getting different portions of our state represented.
Do you have any people you want to recommend?
I guess I wanted to use that to kick off the discussion and see if that set well with people or if they'd rather do it just based off of these bios as well, which I think is also a very valid. So I wanted to go by qualifications and location. I guess I was just throwing that out there as a suggestion.
All right, well, I still come back. Do you have anybody's name in here you want to recommend?
I'm not sold to anyone, but I would say perhaps, let's look through here. And these are 4, there's 4 in this one, is that correct?
3. 3 2-year.
Okay.
And you have 6 applicants.
Mm-hmm.
So
give me a moment, Mr. Mayor. I hadn't put much attention. I'd really just thought of this one more regionally. So let me.
All right, Mr. DeMott.
Well, thank you. First, I would second Councilor Smith with Don Wilson. I think he's a fantastic leader. He'd be well served CML. I also like Katie Sickles from Bayfield Town Manager as an option, and then Sharon Craig.
Okay. Ms. Scully? 3 choices up to you.
Okay, so I'm still looking through these. I like Rick Bain from Brush. I like Sharon Craig from Ignacio. And I'm still trying to look through these last 3. So I'll have to get back to you.
All right, Mr. Seymour.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. Gosh, I keep jumping the queue because I'm not.
All right, hang on just a minute. Let me finish that. I'll come back to you. Mr. Seymour.
continuing the thought of Mayor Pro Tem Sites on that as far as, diversity and then time served too. I'm looking at John Ketterling from Deer Trail because he would be the easternmost from that standpoint. And then Bayfield Town Manager Katie Sickles from a geographical center standpoint. And then I have no problem with any of the other nominations. I just thought that would spread that out. I mean, a majority of these towns are all over the entire state except for missing something from the Northwest.
Okay, Mr. Voles.
Yeah, thank you. I think Sharon Craig from Ignacio, the trustee there, is from Southwest region. So I guess I would support what Mayor Pro Tem Sight said earlier, some regional diversity. I think Don Wilson, I think Councilor Smith had a good personal endorsement of him, so I would accept that as well. And then also I thought Katie Sickles from the Western Slope. It looks like she's done a lot of work out there in a number of different areas, so I think she would also be good. So for me, it'd be Katie Sickles from Bayfield, Don Wilson from Monument, and there was one other one. Did I mention that yet?
Yep, Sharon.
Yeah, Sharon Craig from Ignacio. Yeah.
All right,
those are the three I would say.
All right, Ms. Seitz, we're back to you.
Thank you. So I would say Sharon Craig and John Ketterling, as they are both incumbents. And so we get that kind of historic knowledge. They know what they're doing. And then I would go, I believe it was Councilor DeMont's suggestion for the Katie Sickles, the Bayfield Town Manager.
All right, does anyone else have any recommendations? All right, the way I have the check marks of what you've identified as the people you're interested in: Sharon Craig, Katie Sickles, and Don Wilson have the senior most votes. Rick Bain got 1, John Ketterling got 2, Forrest Newberg got none, Nicholas Wharton got none. Any comments or questions on those? Ms. Scully?
No, sir, I can live with all three of those. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on this item? All right, Mr. DeMont, we will have the staff send this over to you in a memo so you have something to go on who was selected tonight. And we'll ask you, please, on behalf of the city at the election later this month, to cast those selected by the city council.
Will do. Thank you.
Are there any other questions in regards to the post-meeting item? All right, hearing none, Mr. Frankel, we'll turn to you in just a moment. It is now approximately 10:40. I do not expect that the next executive session item will be done in 15 or 20 minutes. So Mr. DeMott, I'm going to go to you and ask you to extend us at least 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move to extend us to 11:10.
How about 11:30? Because we get over to 11. Will that work? Mr. DeMott.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was off mute and I muted myself. Yes, I would move for us to extend to 11:30.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second? Mr. Seymour?
Second.
I will second.
All right, whoever. All right, I have a motion and a second for the council to extend the time for tonight's meeting from 11 to 11:30. All those in favor, please signify by aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. The city council meeting will be extended to 11:30. Mr. Frankel, we've had a request for an executive session. Would you please start us off?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dave Frankel, City Attorney. The executive session that's proposed for this evening is to discuss strategy and progress on negotiations related to the Stanley Lake Park Intergovernmental Agreement and to provide direction to the city's negotiators and legal advice related thereto, as authorized by Westminster Municipal Code 111.3 C7 and 8, as well as Colorado Revised Statute 246402 4B and E1.
Okay. We have had a request to go into an executive session as defined by the city attorney. I will be asking each member of the city council to confirm that they are prepared to go into executive session, understanding the rules and requirements of the executive session. Once we are in the session, there will be another move for confirmation that we are in. So at this time, I will poll the council to be sure that we are prepared to go into executive session. Mr. Demont.
Yes.
Ms. Seitz.
Yes.
Mr. Seymour.
Yes.
Ms. Scully.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Voles.
Yes.
And the mayor as well. We are, therefore, we are ending our night as the Westminster City Council, and all of the sessions open to the public. We will reconvene in about 5 minutes. As the council is aware, there's another session. Ms. Parker, is there anything else you need before we close the meeting?
No, Mr. Mayor, we'll see you in executive session.
All right, we will see everyone in approximately 5 minutes. It takes time to shut down this system and for the staff to be able to open the other one. So give them a couple of minutes before you try to enter into the other session. We will reconvene at approximately 10:48. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.